Chapter 616. There was a first and a second time for everything, but how could there be a third time? Hu Qingfang already escaped twice, and actually wanted to run a third time, inviting another deity transformation tier elite over? Ling Han obviously couldn't bear it, and blocked the carriage with his sword, imposing and imposing. Handsome, Qin Lianyu said infatuatedly. She was actually a romantic person, obviously worshipping heroes the most. Ling Han was similar in age to her, and the difference in tier wasn't great, but his strength was much stronger, instantly conquering her heart. Of course, she only worshipped Ling Han now, which was different from falling in love with him. The ugly freak is planning on Ling Han as expected. Should I kill her? Hu Niu stroked her chin, seriously considering this idea. Ling Han condensed sword qi, forming a fake ray, and 10,000 techniques returned to one was ready to be unleashed after accumulating power. Brat, you're indeed very strong, but this young master is the Wind Moon Sect's young sect master. Are you sure you want to be enemies with me? Hu Qingfang threatened. Being forced to use his background to scare people, it could be seen that he was indeed at his wits' end. Ling Han sneered and said, Wind Moon Sect, such a shameless sect. I might as well uproot it to prevent it from wreaking havoc. Such big words. Hu Qingfang shouted fiercely. Although Ling Han's battle prowess was strong, he was only at the level of the spiritual infant tier, while the Wind Moon Sect had heaven tier warriors overseeing it, and more than one. Deity transformation tier warriors could crush spiritual infant tier warriors, let alone heaven tier ones. I'll kill you first as a sacrifice to the flag. Ling Han had already finished accumulating power, and with a swing of his sword, 29 flashes of sword qi condensed together, turning into a faint golden stripe that swept towards the carriage. The carriage already activated its shield, blocking the stripe, but this was only a matter of an instant. Pong, the shield actually shattered under the bombardment of sword qi, and the stripe continued to sweep past, passing through the middle of the carriage. The entire carriage was instantly split into two, forcibly sliced into two. Terrifying. When the carriage's defenses were activated, it could form a spiritual infant tier level shield, and it relied on origin crystals as a source of power. As long as the origin crystals were still present, the shield could be maintained, and could be instantly replenished. However, it was still destroyed by a single sword strike. Then how terrifying was the instantaneous explosive power of Ling Han's sword strike, for it to be unable to replenish the shield in time. In the carriage, Hu Qingfang leapt out, his face pale. This guy was really too ferocious. He was sitting in the Wind Moon Sect's ancient chariot, which theoretically couldn't be broken by any spiritual infant tier warrior. In the central planes, those in the divine transformation realm could be called experts, and those who had reached this level would not easily start a war with the Wind Moon Sect. Therefore, Hu Qingfang had always been arrogant with the ancient chariot. Until recently, he had kicked 2 iron plates in succession. Hu Niu could bite through the chariot's defenses, and Ling Han was even more awesome, slicing the chariot in two with a single slash. You don't come over. Hu Qingfang lost his greatest trump card, and finally panicked, completely losing his composure. Then scream until your throat breaks, and see if anyone will come to save you, Ling Han said indifferently. Ha ha ha. Hu Niu gave face and laughed, while Zhu Xianer covered her mouth and laughed lightly. Qin Lianyu thought for a moment and also laughed. When an idol told a joke, no matter if it was funny or not, she'd laugh first. Attack! Hu Qingfang's words pushed the 4 beautiful women forward, while he himself turned around and ran. Truly unworthy of being a man. Ling Han's figure flashed, turning into a bolt of lightning and catching up to Hu Qingfang. With a slash piu, the opponent's head flew into the sky, blood spurting wildly from the severed neck. Young sect master! The 4 beautiful women exclaimed, their faces pale. Jackals of the same tribe. Ling Han turned around and swung his sword again, beheading these 4 beautiful women as well. For Wind Moon Sect's people, men harvested primordial yin, and women harvested primordial yang. The higher the tier, the more people they harmed, and none of them had to be tolerated. Ah, you really did it. Qin Lianyu looked at Hu Qingfang's corpse and sighed. Although Wind Moon Sect's sect master has countless wives and concubines, he only has this one son, and is extremely doted on. You killing him is forming a mortal enmity with Wind Moon Sect. Ling Han walked towards her and said, "Then should I silence you?" "No need, no need." Qin Lianyu hurriedly waved her hand. "Isn't there still Yonging Yun, this fish that escaped the net? No need to silence me." This woman had quite the spirit of self-entertainment. Ling Han shook his head and walked over to collect the spatial rings that Hu Qingfang and Duan Mingde dropped. Firstly, these two were truly quite wealthy, especially Hu Qingfang, who actually had a piece of 7th-tier rare metal in his spatial ring. Presumably, it was to be forged into a weapon for him after he advanced into the spiritual infant tier. Perfect, I only have 6 arrows left. Although this piece of rare metal isn't big, forging 5 arrows shouldn't be a problem. Ling Han walked back and said, "Where are you two going?" These two obviously referred to Qin Lianyu and He Lan Yun. "You guys are going to the Restore Heaven Academy, and I'm also going there, so of course we're going together." Qin Lianyu immediately said. He Lan Yun glanced at Qin Yi and said, "I'll also go with you guys." Qin Yi blushed slightly, but a hint of gentleness flashed past his eyes. The calamity just now instead opened the membrane separating the two of them, playing a positive role. Ling Han laughed loudly and casually took out a large handful of medicinal pills from the Black Tower, handing them over to He Lan Yun and said, "Come, come, come, this is a greeting gift." He Lan Yun instantly blushed in embarrassment, but still extended her hand and took back these medicinal pills. She then secretly kissed Qin Yi for another night. Her heart was sweet, and she felt that all the humiliation she suffered before had turned into smoke. Qin Lianyu also extended her slender hand and said, "Do I?" This woman was so thick-skinned. Ling Han sneered and said, "No, stingy." Qin Lianyu muttered. Ling Han ignored her and said, "Let's go." Don't really attract the Wind Moon Sect's ultimate expert. Then we'll have to bear the consequences. Everyone nodded. This was a forest anyways, and wild beasts ran amok, so they could obviously destroy the corpses and erase the evidence for them. Without Hu Qingfang's threat, they walked back to the main road. After all, the terrain in the forest was complicated, affecting speed. "Brother Ling, are you interested in going to a place?" Qin Lianyu approached to strike up a conversation. "No." Ling Han directly refused. "You still haven't heard me say what place it is." Qin Lianyu was a bit resentful, doubting her own charm for the first time. How could Ling Han refuse so straightforwardly? "I'm not interested in any place," Ling Han said. "That's a medicinal valley," Qin Lianyu said. Ling Han was slightly startled. For him, the Alchemy Emperor, a medicinal valley was still quite attractive. In his hands, he could maximize the effects of medicinal ingredients. His current tier was getting higher and higher, and he needed more and more high-level medicinal ingredients. He asked, "What level of medicinal valley?" Chapter 617. If it was only a flower blossom tier or spiritual pedestal tier medicinal valley, Ling Han wouldn't be interested. He'd soon cross the flower blossom tier and advance into the spiritual infant tier. "I'm not sure about the specifics. There's a spiritual infant tier beast keeping watch at the valley entrance, so I don't dare to go deep, but I also found a spirit fruit tree at the valley entrance," Qin Lianyu said. "It's also because of this medicinal valley that I ran into Hu Qingfang." "I see," Ling Han murmured. "There was a 7th-tier spirit fruit tree at the valley entrance, so there might be even higher-level spirit medicines in the valley. Even if they were only 7th-tier spirit medicines, they were still quite useful." "Brother Ling, are you moved?" Qin Lianyu said with a smile. "Are you showing off?" Ling Han said. "Follow me." Qin Lianyu didn't take the chance to push him, but instead led the way in front, while talking about how she discovered the medicinal valley. Because there was still half a year before the Restore Heaven Academy officially opened, she wasn't in a hurry and wandered around along the way, still wanting to find her own chance. And she was really lucky. When she was tracking a big white rabbit, she came to that medicinal valley. However, there were spiritual infant tier beasts roaming about, frightening her. She was just about to find someone to join forces and barge in, but unexpectedly encountered Hu Qingfang. She was then chased by the latter, and tangled with him for more than half a month. So they were still quite far from that medicinal valley. When Qin Lianyu ran, she obviously took many detours, but they didn't have to go to the medicinal valley. They only needed to walk in a straight line, so it was about a 5-day journey. A day later, They came to a small town and stopped to rest for the night. Lady Qin. Lady Qin. Early the next morning, they were about to set off when they saw a young man chasing after them. He looked to be about 26 or 27, and was actually already at the peak stage of the flower blossom tier, quite impressive in strength. His looks were also quite impressive. A cyan outfit completely outlined his slender and fit figure. His hair was jet black as if it could glow, and his skin was sparkling, smoother than many women's. Yirong. Qin Lianyu revealed a surprised expression, and said, "Why did you come?" "I heard that Miss Qin was entangled by that evil thief, Hu Qingfang, so I immediately rushed over. Fortunately I came in time." The azure-clothed man heaved a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. There was an obvious adoration in his eyes. Qin Lianyu pretended not to see and said, "This is the Flying Star sect master's beloved disciple, Yi Rong, Brother Yi. Brother Ye's talent in martial art is extremely high, and he obtained the direct qualification to enter the Restore Heaven Academy." Yi Rong immediately revealed an arrogant expression. He placed his hands behind his back, appearing extremely arrogant. To be able to obtain direct entry into the Restore Heaven Academy, it showed that his talent was indeed extremely awesome. Such a genius was obviously proud of his talent. He was polite to Qin Lianyu because he liked this woman, and in front of others, he naturally revealed the arrogance that geniuses normally had. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. A genius like him naturally disdained to be associated with Ling Han and the others. Ling Han only smiled and said, "So it's Brother Yi." Seeing Ling Han greet him, Can Yi Zhuxian air, and He Lan Yun also greeted him one after another. Hu Niu, however, didn't bother to pay attention to such a cocky guy. Yi Rong took everyone's greetings as a matter of course. To be able to obtain direct entry into the Restore Heaven Academy, this already sufficiently affirmed his talent, and was the capital for his pride. He was completely condescending, and only looked at Qin Lianyu and said, "Miss Qin, let me escort you to the Restore Heaven Academy." Qin Lianyu was displeased and said, "Brother Yi, do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Hehe, I'm just concerned about you." Yirong didn't take offense. However, if these words were said by someone else, he'd definitely fly into a rage, and it was even possible that he'd directly kill the other party. How could a peerless genius be insulted lightly? Qin Lianyu looked at Ling Han with an inquiring gaze, because they were going to the Medicinal Valley next. If there was one more person, then there would obviously be one more person to distribute the treasured medicine after obtaining it. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Since Brother Yi is so sincere, then let's go together." Yirong couldn't help but glance at Ling Han, and felt that this person was a bit perceptive, knowing that he was pursuing Qin Lianyu, and deliberately spoke for him. And there was no harm in guiding him in the future. He opened his mouth very arrogantly and said, "You guys are all going to the Restore Heaven Academy, right?" After obtaining everyone's affirmation, he laughed mischievously and said, "I'm a direct disciple after all and have certain privileges. In the future, when you guys go to the academy to participate in the exam, I'll put in a few good words for you guys and help you guys." Then many thanks, Ling Han said indifferently. He'd seen many people who thought themselves infallible like this, and didn't take it to heart at all. Zhu Xianer, Qin Lianyu, and the other two girls covered their mouths and laughed lightly. If this guy witnessed Ling Han's battle prowess, he probably wouldn't say anything about helping even if he was beaten to death. Blushing, including Yi Rong, the 7 of them continued forward. Yi Rong certainly had quite a background. Flying Star sect was a super sect that wasn't inferior to Wind Moon sect, but couldn't compare to ancient orthodoxies like Absolute Saber sect and Heaven's Sword sect. This Yi Rong was the 7th disciple of Flying Star sect's sect master, and also one of the most outstanding 3. Being able to obtain the direct qualification to enter the Restore Heaven Academy was proof. He was currently only 29 years old, and looked 26 or 27 because he entered the Flower Blossom tier early, and his appearance changed slowly. Peak stage of the Flower Blossom tier. Battle prowess of 16 stars. Extremely outstanding. Along the way, only he had the right to talk, boasting about his battle achievements, what kind of elites and geniuses he'd once beheaded, insufferably arrogant. However, everyone paid no attention to him, making him often unable to continue the conversation as he spoke, appearing extremely awkward. For days later at night they passed by a village. Because it wasn't far from the medicinal valley, they wanted to rush there in one go, not thinking of stopping here. However, Ling Han suddenly stopped. "What's wrong?" Zhu Xian'er asked. Yirong was extremely displeased. If it weren't for Qin Lianyu's sake, he wouldn't drag these people along at all, but now Ling Han actually dared to drag them down. "It's only just entered night. Why isn't there a bit of fire in this village?" Ling Han asked. "Maybe they sleep early," Yirong said casually, appearing very displeased. A mere mortal village, even if something happened, how would it be worth paying attention? The typical mentality of a superior. Ling Han ignored him and turned back towards the village. Yirong trembled in anger. He actually dared to ignore him, truly despicable. He said, "Ignore him, we..." Before the word go left his mouth, he saw the others already follow Ling Han, almost making him faint from anger. Were these people possessed? Chapter 6:18. Ling Han entered the village. This was like a graveyard, deathly silent, and no movement could be heard. "Too quiet," Qin Lianyu said, continuously looking at the place where moonlight couldn't reach, as if a monster would suddenly jump out from the dark and ghastly place. "No breathing, no heartbeat," Zhu Xian'er said solemnly. For experts like them, they could hear the sound of heartbeat and breathing from a distance of 300 meters, and separated by a few walls. This wasn't a problem at all. But now there were none of these sounds, not even the barking of domestic dogs and the crying of chickens and ducks. It was as if this village had been abandoned for countless years, but one could still clearly see corn cobs and red peppers hanging under the eaves of some houses, representing that this village still had people living not long ago, or even yesterday. Strange. Everyone discovered something was off and said one after another. Yirong also walked over and couldn't help but sneer and said, "Just a mortal village, what's there to make a fuss about?" No one paid attention to him, and on the contrary, everyone's curiosity was piqued. Ling Han pushed open a door and walked in. The furniture in the house was all there, and there were even a few dishes on the table, but they were obviously cold now, but with a sniff they hadn't gone bad yet. Something suddenly happened that caused the entire village's people to die, as well as domestic animals. After searching the house, Ling Han came to another house, but it was much more chaotic here. There were obvious signs of fighting, and there was fresh blood on the ground and walls, a ghastly sight. A conflict occurred, but the scale wasn't large. It should only be a dispute among mortals, Qin Lianyu speculated. But what exactly happened to actually affect the entire village and even the livestock? This was puzzling. Even if two people fought, it couldn't possibly affect the entire village, not to mention that even the chickens and dogs suffered. Ling Han walked into the inner room and suddenly his steps paused. Hong, a black shadow, suddenly scuttled out, pouncing towards Ling Han. Its arms spread open, looking like it was going to hug him, but its mouth was wide open, revealing ghastly white teeth as it pointed straight at Ling Han's throat. "Humph! A mere mortal dares to launch a sneak attack?" Yirong said disdainfully. He flicked a finger with his right hand, and that figure instantly fell backwards, a bit of blood appearing on his forehead. Ling Han was astonished. With a wave of his right hand, his origin energy transformed into flames that lit up the surrounding space. He could see that it was indeed a villager. There was a bloody hole in his forehead, but there was no blood splattering everywhere. It was just a bloody hole with a little bit of black blood flowing out. "What's so good about it?" Yirong said unhappily. They were about to reach the medicinal valley, so why were they wasting time here? "This is a corpse soldier." Ling Han frowned. This person had been dead for a long time, so his blood had congealed. If a corpse soldier was not tempered, then it would only be left with the most primitive instincts. They slaughtered and devoured the flesh and blood of living creatures. It was clear that all the poultry in the village had been eaten by the villagers who had turned into corpse soldiers. Most of them had probably entered the forest to continue searching for blood and flesh. However, this one was lying in ambush in the house. It was a corpse when it was not alarmed, but after smelling the scent of living things, it moved. The mystery was solved, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The unknown was the most terrifying. And now that they knew what they were about to face, they were instead relieved. Strange, why are there corpse soldiers here? Could it be the 1,000 corpse sect's doing? Ling Han mumbled. Previously, the 1,000 corpse sect was quite high profile, besieging Million Treasure City with the fourth killing formation. If it weren't for Feng Puyun's appearance, Million Treasure City would probably have fallen into the hands of the 1,000 corpse sect. He had a feeling that the 1,000 corpse sect, which had always been low-key, might rise completely in this era. It was at once the best of times and the worst of times. It's just a low-level corpse soldier. Yi Rong actually recognized the corpse soldier, so he wasn't just arrogant. Ling Han searched the entire village again. There were a total of 5 corpse soldiers here, and what shocked him was that 2 corpse soldiers were obviously much stronger, probably devouring the other corpse soldiers and obtaining an upgrade. At the Fallen Moon Gorge, Ling Han stopped a plot of the 1,000 corpse sect. They wanted to use medicinal pills to turn all the people in the desolate north into corpse soldiers, devouring each other and raising a corpse king. Could it be that the 1,000 corpse sect was now daring enough to act so recklessly in the Middle State? In terms of population, the Middle State was enough to raise many corpse kings, but the problem was that the Middle State still had super forces like the Absolute Saber sect and the Heaven Sword sect, so could they let the 1,000 corpse sect act so recklessly? This world was destined to not be peaceful. Ling Han and the others continued on their way, and when they passed by a few small villages, they discovered that the people there were all turned into corpse soldiers. Such a situation not only shocked Ling Han, but even Qin Lian Yu and Yi Rong became solemn. What did the 1,000 corpse sect mean by this? They didn't find the people of the 1,000 corpse sect, because they were already deep into the mountain forest. Under Qin Lian Yu's guidance, they soon arrived at a valley that was extremely remote. The entrance was blocked by a towering tree, and if one didn't deliberately climb up, it was absolutely impossible to discover it. After the entrance, there was a long valley path that was very tight and narrow, but after walking forward for a few dozen meters, the path began to widen, becoming wider and wider. Above their heads, there were layers of protruding rocks blocking them. Even if one flew from the air, they would only think that this was a solid mountainous region, so how could they know that there was actually another world below? Light fell through a wondrous refraction, and although it wasn't very bright, it was enough for people to see. After walking for a while, the appearance of the valley finally appeared ahead. As expected, there was a 7th-tier spirit fruit at the entrance of the valley. It was a peach tree that bore bright red fruits, each as big as the mouth of a bull, and an alluring fragrance could be smelled from far away. Everyone couldn't help but be tempted, wishing to immediately pluck one to taste, and Hunyou's saliva was about to drip down. However, no one dared to move rashly, because there was a crimson mountain leopard at the entrance of the valley, with a total of 9 fist-sized vein-like patterns on its back. Gray-patterned leopard, a spiritual infant-tier beast. The number of vein-like patterns on its back represented its tier. 9th-layer spiritual infant-tier beasts were usually much stronger than normal 9th-layer spiritual infant-tier martial artists, because beasts had thick skin and flesh, and their claws and sharp teeth were equivalent to rare metals of the same tier. Whether in terms of lethality or defense, they surpassed martial artists of the same tier. How could it be 9th-layer spiritual infant tier? Yi Rong said with a frown. Although he admitted that his strength was hard to find an opponent in the same tier, encountering a spiritual infant tier would only be a piece of cake, not to mention this was a 9th-layer spiritual infant tier beast. Although the spirit fruit was right in front of him, that was all he could do. Ling Han, however, was overjoyed. If he stored this peach tree into the Black Tower, then he'd have an endless supply of 7th-tier spirit peaches to eat. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 619. Ling Han waited at the door. So many years had passed anyway, so he didn't mind waiting a little longer. Hunyou meanwhile kicked a rock out of boredom. Pa pa pa. She seemed to be a bit addicted to it, kicking harder and harder with each kick. Finally she'd gotten into trouble. Aya, who is it, actually daring to ambush this young master? A youngster walked over while holding his forehead, grimacing in pain. His features were all twisted in pain. When Hunyou saw him, she instantly stuck out her tongue and hid behind Ling Han. Then she stretched out a small finger and pointed at Zhu Xian'er, saying, "It's this woman who threw a rock at you." Hunyou saw it clearly. Who would suspect a child? That youngster followed Hu Niu's finger to Zhu Xian'er. He was just about to fly into a rage, but immediately revealed a stunned expression. This woman was really too beautiful, wasn't she? Her beauty was practically unparalleled in absolute cold city. All of a sudden, it seemed as if his forehead didn't hurt anymore. He hurriedly put on what he thought was his most elegant smile, and said, "I am Feng Yixio, may I know Mrs. name?" Zhu Xian'er only glanced at him indifferently, and said, "We've met by chance and are only passers-by. There's no need to tell me your name." "You have character, I like it." Feng Yixio turned his face away and said to himself. Then he turned back, and his smile became even more brilliant. To be able to meet in the vast sea of people, isn't this a kind of fate? "Miss, your beauty is too dazzling. My eyes can only feel your existence." Zhu Xian'er directly ignored him, lest he took advantage of the situation and pestered her endlessly. "Miss, your beauty is poison, but I will gladly endure it. I've been conquered by you. Please allow me to use the rest of my life to love you dearly." Feng Yixio blurted out words of love one after another. He was definitely a veteran in the brothel, and did not repeat even half a sentence. With his handsome appearance and his sweet mouth, it was believed that there would be countless women who would willingly jump into his gentle trap. Unfortunately, this did not have the slightest effect on Zhu Xian'er, and instead caused her expression to become colder and colder. "Idiot, why do you have so much nonsense to say? Just knock her out and carry her home." Hu Niu really could not go on anymore, and jumped out to give advice. "That's not too good, right?" Feng Yixio scratched his head as he grinned foolishly. "Trust Niu," Hu Niu said encouragingly. Feng Yixio clapped his hands and said, "Let's do it." Ling Han could not help but laugh and said, "What do you want to do?" Feng Yixio instantly shuddered and said, "I have no interest in men, so don't play dirty jokes with me." "Fuck, was this guy a clown?" Ling Han laughed coldly and said, "Since you've said so, then I have no choice but to play with you. Don't you dare act recklessly, I am not that kind of person. Furthermore, I am very powerful, so don't seek trouble for yourself." Feng Yixio hurriedly drew his sword, and put on a vigilant expression that said, "You're a pervert, don't come near me." Ling Han moved and grabbed out at the other very casually. "Damn pervert move." Feng Yixio drew his sword and a sword ray slashed out, slicing towards Ling Han's wrist. Although this person was inexplicably unreliable, he really did have some skill. There were not many people who could condense sword ray at this age. However, compared to Ling Han, the two of them were completely not on the same level. Ling Han's hand twisted, and had already grabbed the other's wrist. He smiled and said, "Guess will I steam you or braise you? Mother." Feng Yixio's whole body was covered with goosebumps, and he hurriedly exerted his strength to struggle free, but Ling Han's hand was like an iron hoop, so he could not move at all, and could only stare at him helplessly. "Don't call me mother, call me big brother, and I will let you go," Ling Han said, smiling. "You think you are worthy of this young master calling you big brother?" Feng Yixio humphed, and with a shake of his left hand, there actually appeared another sword, which he pierced towards Ling Han. Ling Han released his hand, and then grabbed out at Feng Yixio's left hand. He caught it head-on. Feng Yixio paled in shock. How could this person's attack be so fast? He roared in fury, and his right hand slashed out again. This time he used his full power. Even his hair stood on end like needles, and his sword intent turned solid, charging towards Ling Han ruthlessly. The latter's physique was extremely strong, so his spirit would definitely not be stable enough. If he was hit by his attack, he would definitely hold his head and groan. How could there be such a monster in this world who had cultivated both his physique and spirit to the pinnacle? Ling Han smiled faintly, and with a move of his sword Feng Yixio's sword intent instantly shattered, and as if he had suffered a heavy blow, Feng Yixio's face instantly turned pale, and even his expression was distorted, appearing to be in incredible pain. He released his hand, and Feng Yixio curled up on the ground, his whole body spasming. This attack on his spirit was not light. However, for him this was no less than a kind of tempering. If he could endure it, the toughness of his spirit would definitely be able to advance another step further. Young Master Feng. At this moment, two people walked out from the door. One was the guard who had gone in to make the report previously, and the other was a slender old man. He looked to be in his 60s or 70s, and had quite a bearing, but at this moment, his face was filled with agitation. With a quick stride, he rushed in front of Feng Yixio and helped him up. After a careful inspection, he only calmed down slightly when he discovered that there were no injuries on the latter's body. The old man turned to Ling Han, and a cold glint appeared in his eyes as he said, "Was it you who injured young Master Feng?" Ling Han smiled and said, "The term injured is too inaccurate. It should be said that we sparred, and he was no match for me." "Hung, coming to our Cold Spear Association, and still daring to injure someone, how dare you?" the old man said coldly. He stretched out his right hand, and it instantly turned green, exuding the texture of metal. Multiple patterns flickered on it. This old man's cultivation level was in the deity transformation tier, so his abilities were really not low. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back and said, "Your status is not low either. Then let me ask you, do you have any impression of the names Zhang Yufeng, Yun Yong Wang, Kang Xiu Yuan?" "Hung, it's useless even if you bring out a powerful backer. Today no one will be able to save you." The old man leaped out, and struck out in Ling Han's direction. The palm had not yet arrived, but a strong gust of wind had already arrived. Origin power was oppressive, and its destructive power was extremely shocking. Ling Han pressed out with his right hand, and the old man was instantly sent flying. Pung 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 pung. At least a dozen or so walls had been forcibly broken by him, and only then did he stop. He directly fainted. This time he should really be taken seriously, right? Tung tung tung. A great many people rushed out from the manor, and surrounded Ling Han, but none of them made a move. Hung! A frightening aura circulated, and a figure also walked out. "Greetings, seventh elder." Everyone half knelt in greeting. That was an old man with a head full of white hair, but his spirit was hale and hearty, and his eyes were shining brightly. He stared at Ling Han and said, "Young man, you are quite bold, actually daring to come to the Cold Spear Association and behave atrociously." "Behave atrociously?" Ling Han shook his head. "It was only self-defense. However, there is a limit to my patience. If no one is willing to have a proper talk with me, then I can only first knock you all over and let you all calm down." Chapter 620. Ling Han and the others all cried out miserably. They were so innocent, and were actually implicated by a large white rabbit. Go go go. They hurriedly broke into a run. This wasn't something they could fight against at all. Any random beast could take care of them. They didn't care about exposing their tracks, flying in the sky and running very fast. "I'm going to faint. That damned rabbit actually followed us here." Ling Han turned around, and saw that the large white rabbit had actually followed them after they arrived. This damn rabbit's speed was really too fast. With a step, it was several dozen meters, actually rapidly closing the distance between them. This damn rabbit, everyone gritted their teeth. It was fine if you tricked them, but you actually still wanted to continue harming them. What kind of grudge was this? This rabbit seems to be the one that led me into the valley," Qin Lianyu suddenly said. "Fuck. This rabbit is also a habitual thief. Screwed us over. However, we certainly stole something, so it's not considered unjust." Ling Han grabbed everyone with origin power and used the demon fairy step, suddenly speeding up. "Gidea gidea." Hunyo mischievously rode on Ling Han's shoulder and cried out excitedly. In her dictionary there was never the word fear. Poo piu piu. That large white rabbit's legs actually stepped on the air and also soared into the sky. As its legs stepped on the air, its speed was also shockingly fast, actually not inferior to Ling Han, who used the demon fairy step and used the thunderclap ninth heaven mystical power. It was no wonder. If it didn't have such speed, how would it dare enter the medicinal valley and steal under the noses of so many deity transformation tier beasts? "Damn rabbit. You got yourself into big trouble." Qin Lianyu couldn't help but shout. Back then, it was this rabbit that led her here and discovered this medicinal valley, but now, because of this damn rabbit, they were chased by deity transformation tier beasts. Rabbit so fat. Hunyo turned her head, instantly drooling. "Nyo wants to eat rabbit meat." "Pa, you want to eat Uncle Rabbit's meat? You're still 108,000 years too early." This large white rabbit grabbed the carrot, in its mouth with its little claws and immediately retorted sarcastically at Hunyo. Puff! Everyone instantly stuck out their tongues. This damned rabbit actually knew how to speak. After a beast advanced into the flower blossom tier, its intelligence would develop, and it indeed possessed intelligence not inferior to that of a human's. However, opening its mouth to speak human language, this was too fantastical. What? Are you all scared when you see that Lord Rabbit can speak? Haha, Lord Rabbit is mighty as expected, the large white rabbit said proudly. Damned rabbit, you did it on purpose, didn't you? Ling Han said. You didn't run anywhere else, but you led the pursuers here. It's fun to run together. White Rabbit did not deny it at all. Damned rabbit, just you wait. Qin Lianyu was even more furious, wailing loudly. If she wasn't grabbed by Ling Han's origin power hand, she would have definitely gone to fight this lowly rabbit. Rabbit meat seems to be very delicious. Hunyo's eyes lit up as she stared at the large white rabbit. Come, Uncle Rabbit is right here. Bring it on. Whoever's afraid is a coward. The large white rabbit was very mischievous, and it even wagged its tiny tail, looking very despicable to the bone. Nyo's rabbit meat. Hunyo was excited and suddenly charged over. Her speed was even faster, and with a flash of lightning she rode on the large white rabbit's back. This large white rabbit was half a person's height, and Hunyo's height was also half a person's height. The human and rabbit were about the same in terms of physique. One was completely snow white, with only 2 eyes that were like rubies, and the other was pink like carved jade, extremely cute. Just by appearance they were all deceitful, but in reality, Hunyo opened her mouth and bit at the large white rabbit. With a single bite, she bit down on the large white rabbit's tail. It was so painful that the despicable rabbit's whole body instantly trembled, and its speed unbelievably doubled. With a xiao, it shot out and quickly overtook Ling Han. It screamed. Are you born in the year of the dog? It hurts so much, your Lord Rabbit. Hunyo was also very gloomy. Her teeth could be said to be successful in every endeavor, but she actually couldn't bite off this lowly rabbit's tail in one bite. It was truly inconceivable. Her ferocity flared up, and she bit onto the rabbit's tail without letting go while continuously shaking her head, wanting to forcibly pull off the rabbit's tail. The large white rabbit screamed continuously and ran even faster. Ling Han hurriedly sped up, but could only watch the human and rabbit disappear before his eyes. After all, he still hadn't cultivated the thunderclap 9th heaven to great accomplishment, and he still had a group of people with him. Fortunately, the pursuers behind also fell further and further behind, and soon disappeared. Ling Han walked forward for a while, and saw that the large white rabbit no longer ran, but tried hard to shake off Hunyo. However, Hunyo bit onto the rabbit's tail, and no matter how this lowly rabbit shook, it was useless and refused to let go. Let go, let go. The large white rabbit jumped anxiously. Lord Rabbit's tail is short in the first place, and if it's bitten off by you, how would Lord Rabbit have the face to see others in the future? Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Lowly Rabbit, give me the dragon blood tyrant ginseng in your hand, and I'll help you. The large white rabbit was startled, and stopped its movements. It walked towards Ling Han and said, You actually recognize this spirit ginseng? It immediately screamed again, and Hunyo began to grind her teeth again. Human, hurry and make this little girl let go. Your Lord Rabbit is going to die. The large white rabbit continued to scream. Ginseng. Ling Han extended his hand. A pained expression appeared on the large white rabbit's face. It had expended a great deal of effort to steal this from the medicinal valley, and it had only licked it a few times. Now it had to hand it over. However, its tail was in pain from being bitten, and this strange little girl gave it an indescribable sense of fear. It didn't dare to unleash a powerful attack, or else it would bring about an unimaginable disaster. It could only raise its 2 small front paws and throw the ginseng to Ling Han. Ling Han caught it and looked carefully. He saw that the roots of this ginseng were still there, and it was still full of life force. He laughed loudly, and put the ginseng into the black tower. Great, 1 year later he could eat large amounts of treasured ginseng. This was the dragon blood tyrant ginseng. According to legend, it was a 1,000-year-old ginseng that bathed in the blood of a true dragon, and produced a mutation. One had to know how domineering the blood of a true dragon was. This ginseng could bathe in dragon's blood and not die, and instead absorb the essence of the dragon's blood. So the medicinal effects were naturally shocking. However, this definitely couldn't be the first-generation dragon blood tyrant ginseng. Its effects obviously couldn't compare to the first generation, but it was still a treasure among 9th-tier treasured medicines, tempting even heaven-tier warriors. Planted, it only needed a year to be harvested like a radish. Ling Han smiled and said, Hunyo, let go. This lowly rabbit isn't cooked, it's not tasty. Hunyo finally let go, and after some thought said, this rabbit is delicious, delicious even if it's not cooked. She stared at the large white rabbit again, saliva dripping out. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 621. The large white rabbit was so scared that all of its fur stood on end, and its 2 legs couldn't help but tremble. It wanted to run away, but when it thought about it, it didn't want to. The dragon blood tyrant ginseng had been taken away by this human youth. It had put in a lot of effort and searched countless times before it managed to steal the ginseng. Human, why don't we all eat ginseng soup? Uncle Rabbit will catch a blue phoenix and make a black chicken ginseng soup. It's definitely nutritious. The rabbit immediately said to Hunyo, drooling all over the ground, make rabbit ginseng soup. Hunyo immediately raised her hand. Fuck you. The large white rabbit almost kicked Hunyo, but its heart palpitated, not daring to act recklessly. Ling Han shook his head and said, that ginseng can't be eaten for now. It has to wait for another year. I promise you, you give me one now, and I'll return you 2 a year later. How about it? The large white rabbit couldn't help but widen its red eyes, and said, human brat, you're bragging too much. You think your Uncle Rabbit was coaxed to believe such a lie? Uncle Rabbit eats more spirit medicine than you eat rice. Ruffian rabbit, Ling Han stuck his middle finger at it. Anyway, that's what I said. Believe it or not. Who asked the treasure ginseng to be on him? Believe, of course Uncle Rabbit believes. The large white rabbit hurriedly nodded. Ah! It suddenly screamed again. This girl bit Uncle Rabbit again. Hunyo. Ling Han said. Hunyo reluctantly withdrew her mouth from the large white rabbit's leg, and said, this rabbit is delicious. Nyo wants to eat rabbit meat. She cried out, acting coquettishly. Hunyo won't make a fuss. Ling Han picked Hunyo up, and couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Hunyo was delicious but never so gluttonous. He took out some dried meat and handed it to Hunyo, letting her eat first. Hunyo gnawed unhappily, her eyes still fixed on the large white rabbit, causing the rabbit to clamp its tail between its legs. However, the rabbit's tail was too short, and it was very difficult to clamp it. Since the pursuers have retreated, let's eat something first to calm down, Ling Han said, taking out the pot and putting in the ingredients from the Black Tower. He even deliberately pulled out a few thousand-year-old ginsengs. However, even in the Black Tower, the ginseng could only grow to 1,000 years old, and couldn't advance any further. That was because these ginseng seeds were only ordinary items, and 1,000 years was the limit. Therefore, Ling Han didn't mind sharing it with everyone. Otherwise, it would just rot in the mud. 1,000-year purple ginseng. 1,000-year jade ginseng. 1,000-year yellow ginseng. Qin Lianyu looked at them one by one, her beautiful eyes involuntarily radiating with astonishment. In terms of species, these ginsengs were only at the level of level 4 or 5 spirit medicine, but they were old enough. 1,000 years was enough to raise their value by another level. Most importantly, Ling Han had actually taken them out to make soup. How extravagant was that? He'd seen tycoons, but to be this rich, there probably wasn't a second one in the world. Even shattering void-tier elites couldn't do it. After all, how many thousand-year-old spirit ginseng were there in the world? And there was an upper limit? But when he looked at Zhu Xian'er and Qin Yi, they didn't seem surprised at all, as if this was a common occurrence. Could it be that they often ate this kind of extravagant meal? The large white rabbit was also shocked. It had stolen quite a lot of spirit medicines, but the ones he took out were all 1,000-year-old treasured medicines, even making its heart tremble. But it immediately screamed again. It turned out that Hunyo couldn't help but bite it again. As Ling Han cooked, he was curious and said, Ruffian rabbit, you're a spiritual infant tier expert at any rate. Why are you like a punching bag? This made him think of Hellion Sun Shui, but he didn't know where this Hai Niu went now. After a while he really missed her a bit. Uncle Rabbit doesn't stoop to the level of a child, the large white rabbit said proudly, but when Hu Niu revealed her eerie little white teeth again, it hurriedly leaped in fright and fled behind Ling Han. Rabbit, come play with Niu. Hu Niu went to catch. Let's play eagle catches chicks. Niu is the eagle, and if you're caught by Niu, Niu will eat you. She spread her figure, and like a flash of lightning, she grabbed at the large white rabbit. Motherfucker, you still want to eat Uncle Rabbit? Your uncle. The large white rabbit hurriedly broke into a run. One human and one rabbit ran around the bonfire. One was fast and the other wasn't slow either. They actually couldn't catch up or get rid of each other, fighting to a draw. Ling Han was leisurely and contented, cooking the soup without any distractions. Aren't you going to do something about it? Qin Lian you couldn't help but say. Don't care, it'll stop to eat when it's done. Ling Han said indifferently. This was really irresponsible. No wonder he taught such a fierce little girl like Hu Niu. As expected, when the iron pot emitted an alluring fragrance, Hu Niu immediately stopped and sat down properly. However, she couldn't help but stare impatiently and start drooling. Give Uncle Rabbit's eagle but... The large white rabbit also sat down, but stayed far away from Hu Niu. Rabbits also eat meat? Ling Han couldn't help but ask with a smile. The thieving eagle ate who knows how many of Uncle Rabbit's ancestors and descendants. Uncle Rabbit is taking revenge, the large white rabbit said seriously. Pa, it's obviously gluttonous. Ling Han scooped out the eagle butt, picked up a spirit ginseng, poured some soup over it, and handed it to the large white rabbit. This eagle was killed not long ago. It was in the flower blossom tier, and was a great tonic for them. Unfortunately, it wasn't a king among beasts. Everyone got their share of ginseng soup and started eating. This eagle's meat was fatty, and the essence of the treasured ginseng was all squeezed into the soup, which could be said to be both fresh and nourishing. Everyone ate until they were glowing all over, with vein-like patterns moving. When Ling Han cooked it, he incorporated alchemy methods, extracting all the essence of the treasured ginseng and intertwining it with the Tao of heaven and earth, so it was naturally a mess of nourishment. After eating the soup, Ling Han also took out spirit peaches, one for each person since they wouldn't be able to digest more. Everyone meditated to refine the benefits they ate, and as time passed, the essence would naturally be lost. In this meal, Ling Han, Hu Niu, and the large white rabbit ate the most. Ling Han and Hu Niu were big eaters in the first place, and the large white rabbit's tier was higher, and it was also a bit of a freak, eating no less than Ling Han and Hu Niu. It drank bowl after bowl of soup, not knowing what was embarrassed at all. After a long while, everyone stood up one by one, revealing a satisfied expression as they benefited greatly. However, Yi Rong should have waited for a long time. That's a bit embarrassing. He shouldn't mind. Hee. Everyone didn't have a good impression of Yi Rong, so they obviously didn't mind what he thought. Let's go. They obviously didn't dare to go to the medicinal valley again. There was a large group of deity transformation tier beasts inside, and the waters were very deep. Carelessly wandering in would cause big trouble. They went to the agreed place. Although they didn't like Yi Rong since they agreed, they weren't people who would go back on their words. Ling Han asked the ruffian rabbit about the origins of the medicinal valley. Chapter 622. What is the origin of that mountain valley? Why are there so many deity transformation tier demonic beasts? Ling Han was curious. They were deity transformation tier demonic beasts, and any one of them could rule over an entire mountain region. How could they possibly live together? The large white rabbit said, of course, there's a heaven tier eagle king in the valley, purple jade azure eagle, an ancient remnant species, the king among kings, ruling over 10,000 beasts. Ling Han sighed. In the previous life, this eagle king was definitely an invincible existence, not as simple as a king among beasts, but a king among kings, able to stand side by side with Sword Emperor and Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. And in this life, such a beast king still had the chance to advance further and advance into the Shattering Void tier. If it really took that step, then it would truly be the strongest existence in the world, almost peerless. You're quite daring to barge in, Ling Han said with a smile. Rabbits and eagles can't coexist, so Uncle Rabbit obviously has to give that bastard trouble and steal all its spirit medicine. I definitely can't let it advance into the shattering void tier. The large white rabbit shouted. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, too bad. A heaven-tier king among beasts can teach you how to behave with one clog. Damn brat, do you know how to chat? Can't you say something nice? The large white rabbit said unhappily. Ah, biting your Uncle Rabbit again. Hunyo snorted and said, don't be mean to Nyo's Ling Han, or else I'll eat you. Let go, let go. The large white rabbit only knew how to scream. As they spoke, they also arrived at the agreed rendezvous point. The small village was in sight, but the villagers all became corpse soldiers, already killed by Ling Han and the others earlier. Why did you guys only come now? Yi Rong appeared and said unhappily to everyone. Did they know how long he waited? He was a genius that obtained direct entry into the Restore Heaven Academy. How valuable was his time? And it actually took him half a day. We ran into something, Qin Lianyu said, and recounted the beast-tide riot. What? Yi Rong was shocked. No wonder I felt the mountains crumble and the earth split earlier. So it was actually a beast tide erupting, and they were all deity transformation tier beasts. Lady Qin, fortunately you're all right. His eyes were burning as he looked at Qin Lianyu, so hot that it was somewhat unbearable. Ling Han replied with an oh, then took out a spirit peach and threw it over, saying, this is for you. Yi Rong subconsciously caught it. He was stunned for a moment before he said, you guys actually managed to pick spirit peaches? It was truly inconceivable. They had actually managed to pick spirit peaches in the midst of a beast tide. However, he used up a teleportation talisman in exchange for a spiritual peach. Even if it was a 7th-rank spiritual fruit, it was still too much of a loss. But who asked them to encounter a beast tide? Getting a spirit peach was better than getting nothing. Yi Rong gloomily put away the spirit peach. This was, after all, a 7th-rank spirit fruit. Of course he couldn't eat it carelessly. It was best to save it for when he encountered a bottleneck in his cultivation. Then, after eating the spirit fruit, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth would interweave, and he might be able to break through. Seeing this, everyone shook their heads. One must know that they had casually eaten the spiritual fruits. Different people indeed had different fates. Why is there a rabbit? Yi Rong stared at the large white rabbit. A rabbit that could grow so big was undoubtedly a beast. Previously, Qin Lianyu only said that a beast tide had erupted, but didn't say that the beast tide this time was actually caused by the ruffian rabbit stealing the dragon blood tyrant ginseng. With Yi Rong's eyesight, he obviously couldn't see through a spiritual infant-tier beast rabbit. The ruffian rabbit revealed its true form and yelled at Yi Rong, what? Uncle Rabbit will kick your face full of blood. The corner of Yi Rong's mouth instantly twitched. A beast that could actually speak was extremely inconceivable. But what was even more unexpected was that this rabbit's mouth was actually so despicable, capable of angering people to the point of exploding in a matter of minutes. This beast rabbit can actually speak. He suppressed the fury in his heart and raised his head to confirm with Qin Lianyu. This was hard to believe. There were indeed beasts with intelligence that didn't lose to humans, but being able to speak human language was unheard of, not to mention being so ruffian. In the boundless world, nothing is too strange, Qin Lianyu said. Come, let's go to the Restore Heaven Academy, Ling Han said. Everyone set off again. The ruffian rabbit was very attentive to Ling Han. This human casually took out 1,000-year-old ginseng as a side dish, so he should be extremely wealthy, making it envious and staring at Ling Han to eat. Yet it would always suffer Hunyo's sneak attacks. Who knew how many bites it received? And screaming was its daily routine. What was rare was that no matter how many times Hunyo abused it, it seemed to view Hunyo as its first love, always running and never thinking of counterattacking, making Ling Han click his tongue in wonder. It was truly a strange thing. After entering the Flying Flower County, travel-worn youngsters could be seen from time to time. Most of them weren't even 50 years old, and flower blossom tier and spiritual infant tier cultivators over 50 years old could obviously be classified as young. However, those over 100 years old obviously wouldn't compete with youngsters, as they couldn't put down their old face. Isn't this brother Yi Rong? Ling Han and the others just walked out of a small town, and were about to hurry on their way when they saw a group of people walk out from the side. Someone recognized Yi Rong and immediately called out with a pleasantly surprised expression. "You are..." Yi Rong hesitated slightly. He indeed didn't recognize the other party. "I'm Hoji." The other party hurriedly introduced himself, a disciple of the Five Elements Valley. 2 years ago, I met Brother Yi on the 12 consecutive rings. At that time, Brother Yi won 12 consecutive victories, becoming one of the few winners since the 12 consecutive rings started, truly making me prostrate myself in admiration. Yi Rong gave an "oh" and revealed a look of realization. In reality, he only remembered the 12 consecutive rings, so how could he remember the people who were once below the stage? However, he became famous in a single battle on the 12 consecutive rings, and being mentioned by the other party, he couldn't help but feel pleased with himself. He revealed a proud expression, and instantly, his favorable impression of this person increased greatly. Come, let me introduce everyone. This is Brother Yi Rong, Flying Star Sect's outstanding disciple, and obtained the direct entry qualification to the Restore Heaven Academy. Hoji introduced to his friends. Everyone instantly cried out in surprise. What Flying Star Sect, 12 consecutive rings were all very abstract, but the phrase direct entry qualification to the Restore Heaven Academy could represent everything. An awesome genius. Instantly, those people all surrounded them, and none of them didn't reveal expressions of worship, greatly satisfying Yi Rong's vanity, and he was in no hurry to leave. Qin Lianyu couldn't help but cough and said, "Can we be on our way?" In front of young Master Yi, "How are you qualified to speak?" One person reprimanded Qin Lianyu, hurriedly flattering Yi Rong. Yi Rong instantly revealed a displeased expression, and said, "This is Dark Glory Valley's Qin Lianyu. Lady Qin, my good friend, quickly apologized to Lady Qin." Once that person heard, how could he not know that Yi Rong was interested in Qin Lianyu? He hurriedly bowed and said, "I didn't know it was Lady Qin. I hope Lady Qin can forgive me." Qin Lianyu sneered and said, "Yi Rong, just accompany them. We can't afford to associate with an important person like you." She'd had enough of listening to him brag along the way. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 623. When was the last time he had come to the Heaven Sword sect? Ling Han couldn't help but look dazed, as if he had returned to 10,000 years ago. He had come here to concoct alchemical pills at the invitation of the Sword Emperor, and it was here that he had deceived the 3 styles of black origin. 10,000 years had passed, and it was as if nothing had changed here in the slightest. It was just like yesterday. Woo! The sound of a bugle horn rang out, and innumerable people flew out from various places in the mountains. This great mountain barrier formation had been broken, so the entire sect was naturally mobilized. The auras of elites rose and fell, and were shockingly terrifying. If these people joined forces and attacked together, would the lower realm instantly collapse? However, with the existence of the Eye of Heavenly Tao, it shouldn't be so. It would definitely interfere to maintain the stability of this realm. For the Eye of Heavenly Tao, as long as the order of this realm wasn't destroyed, it wouldn't care how many people were killed. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress and the Beast Snake King were both here, and counting them, the number of Shattering Void tier elites was actually in the hundreds. It could be seen that the 5 great sects had used up all their resources to fight a decisive battle to the death with the Purple Moon Empire here. After this battle, the world would be at peace. A feeling of disbelief rose up in Ling Han. This was too easy, wasn't it? Thinking again, the Purple Moon Empire certainly grasped overwhelming power. Even if Ma Duobao didn't make a move, the 8 kings had already beaten the 5 great sects to a pulp, and in the end, they could only defend this final place. Now that a decisive battle had occurred, it seemed reasonable. "Esteemed guest, you've come from afar. Please forgive me for not going out to greet you." An old man with an amiable expression walked out. He was tall and slender, with a head full of white hair and a white beard. Dressed in coarse hemp clothing, he exuded a sage-like air. When he walked out like this, even the Sword King and Azure Phoenix Divine Empress took a step back in unplanned unison, making way for him to take his place. Now there were only 4 similarly white-haired old men, 4 men and 1 woman, that could stand side by side with this old man. They were definitely old antiques, and it was obvious that their vitality had declined. It was very strange. The 5 great sects obviously had the time source fluid, which could seal the loss of their own life force. After the reckoning, they could enter the immortal realm and break through again. Then, after becoming immortals, their lifespan would be terrifyingly increased. Is this to deal with great enemies like us? The Justice Mountain King said with a sneer. In this world, one can't break through to the immortal realm, so the longer one spends, the more likely it is to go further in the Shattering Void tier, increasing battle prowess to 15 stars, 16 stars, or even higher, the Flame King continued. However, 14 stars is a threshold, and every subsequent star crossing is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Even Shattering Void tier cultivators only have a lifespan of a little over 1,000 years, so what if they spend their entire life studying? Talent is there for all to see. If they can only reach 12 stars of battle prowess in their prime, then even if they die of old age, they'll at most reach 14 stars. The 8 kings spoke one after another, completely unconcerned, treating these 5 old men as if they were nothing. I've long heard that the 8 kings' heroism is matchless, and that their divine arts are invincible. Today I've finally seen it for myself. The old antique from before was not angered. He smiled and said, "Why don't we make a bet? A bunch of losers, what right do you have to make a bet with us?" The 8 kings sneered. "You don't dare?" The old man goaded. Although the 8 kings' heroism reached the clouds, they definitely wouldn't act rashly, and none of them spoke. This time they were here to pacify the 5 sects, so what bet? Yet Ma Duobao smiled and asked, "What bet?" "We're cultivators, so what we bet is obviously strength," the old man said with a smile. The old man smiled and said, "Each side will send out 9 people to fight one-on-one. The side that wins 5 rounds will win this bet." The 8 kings were all stunned. Fight 9 rounds? Did you know that the 8 kings plus Ma Duobao just happened to be 9 people, and also happened to be the strongest battle force of the Purple Moon Empire? This kind of one-on-one duel could be said to be the Purple Moon Empire's strongest suit. Using one's weakness to fight another's strength, so stupid. But the 5 sects had so many old foxes, so how could they all be so stupid? Ma Duobao continued to ask, "What if we win, and what if we lose?" This was the key. Otherwise, even if they lost, it wouldn't hurt or itch, so if it was a bet, then so be it. That old man said, "If we lose, we'll submit to the Purple Moon Empire, and you can do whatever you want with us." When he said that, even the 8 kings were moved. Had the other party eaten too much? Or was his brain damaged by a donkey's kick? Ma Duobao smiled as if he didn't mind at all, and said, "Then what if we lose? Within 100 years, no more fighting." That old man raised a finger. The conditions of this bet could be said to be extremely unfair. If the 5 sects lost, their lives would be dealt with at will, but if the Purple Moon Empire lost, they would only be unable to mobilize their troops within 100 years. For normal people, 100 years was a lifetime, but for Shattering Void tier elites, 100 years was only 10 years for normal people. Ma Duobao revealed a puzzled expression. The 5 sects could only rely on the number of Shattering Void tier elites. As the saying went, many ants could bite an elephant to death, and there was strength in numbers. However, he was naturally unafraid. Aside from himself, no one knew exactly how powerful his strength was. Now, the 5 sects gave up their advantage in numbers, and wanted to duel them one-on-one. This was practically pitifully stupid. What was the reason behind this? That old man raised another finger, and said with a smile, "However, we have a restrictive condition." Was this the main point? "And that is that your majesty cannot participate in the battle." Ma Duobao could not participate in the battle, which indeed meant that the Purple Moon Empire had one less super battle prowess, but the problem was that the 8 kings were practically invincible. Up until now, aside from the giant silver spider in the Fire Country's ancient mining area in Yishuangshuang, there shouldn't be anyone alive with battle prowess of 15 stars of Shattering Void tier, right? Even if the 5 sects could find these 2, and even if the 8 kings lost these 2 matches, well, wouldn't they still be able to guarantee a steady victory in 6 matches? Strange. "Do you dare?" the old general asked. Ma Duobao pondered slightly, then nodded and said, "All right, I accept this bet." After all, the other party had over 100 Shattering Void tier elites, and as long as a few of them managed to escape, They would wreak havoc in the world, which was enough to cause massive damage to the power of the nation. Thus, if they could subdue the enemy without fighting, this was the best strategy. The old man chuckled and said, "Since that's the case, then we'll send someone out first for the first match, and rotate for the next match. Can your majesty make use of such an exchange?" "Yes." Ma Duobao agreed. "And you'll fight in the first match," the old man said. "Yes," the Sword King agreed. His figure soared into the air, and stopped 100 miles above the summit. He said, "8 kings who will fight with me? I'll do it." The Lunar King also soared, and stood beside the Sword King. The first match was obviously the Purple Moon Empire's victory. The Sword King was indeed very strong, having comprehended Sword Heart, but he hadn't reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, and his battle prowess was only 11 stars. How could he rival the Lunar King? They weren't on the same level at all. "Please." The Sword King wasn't afraid, and formed a sword technique in his hand, looking elegant and graceful. Chapter 624. The Rain Emperor was still domineering. His fists were densely woven with patterns, and as he punched, fist ray intertwined like a crimson dragon. He was truly a rare talent of the generation. After breaking free from the shackles of the imperial throne and leaving the desolate north, he improved astonishingly. Previously, in the Dark Devil Forest, he had only stepped into the Flower Blossom tier not long ago, but now he shockingly advanced into the Spiritual Infant tier. After advancing into the Spiritual Infant tier, the Rain Emperor looked a few years younger. Previously, he was a middle-aged man in his 40s, but now he was only in his 30s. Spiritual Infant tier cultivators had a lifespan of up to 500 years, and the Rain Emperor was only in his early 60s, which was equivalent to a 100-year-old man who had lived for over a dozen years, so he was naturally young. However, the increase in lifespan was an unnoticeable change, and the rejuvenation of appearance and body was much slower, only occurring when one broke through to the next tier. Ling Han nodded inwardly. The Rain Emperor probably had a shocking encounter recently, or else talent alone couldn't possibly have such improvement. The Rain Emperor cultivated Ray, and his battle prowess was naturally terrifying. So who could fight him? Ling Han looked towards the Rain Emperor's opponent. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s, similarly barehanded, and started a fierce exchange with the Rain Emperor, his fists wrapped with a shocking grand light. Pung pung pung. The two fought fiercely in the sky, and a shockwave could make many unable to escape in time. Many even joined forces to form a defense, but were unwilling to retreat further, wanting to watch the battle from a closer distance. That's not Ray. Ling Han saw clearly that although the fist of the young man that was exchanging blows with the Rain Emperor was also wrapped with grand light, it wasn't Ray, but many intertwined qi. Fake Ray. Come on, Xinyuan Ziguang wasn't the only one who cultivated fake Ray. There were still some geniuses like him. A quick count revealed that there were over 20 streams of qi. However, it was unclear exactly how many there were. It was because these streams of qi were too tightly entwined, and they were also enveloped by that person's martial will. It was impossible for outsiders to see them. However, even if there was so much qi, fake Ray was fake Ray after all and couldn't compare to real Ray. The Rain Emperor only condensed 10 flashes of qi to form Ray, yet had an overwhelming advantage. However, that opponent's grasp of martial arts techniques was extremely shocking, forcibly making up for the gap between qi and Ray. Who is that young man? Ling Han asked the people beside him. Oh, you don't even know him? That person was shocked. Ling Han smiled and said, "Should I know?" "You must have just come," said the man. Ling Han laughed heartily. "You even managed to come out. I admire you. If you've been here for a long time, there's no way you wouldn't know about that show-off. Murongqing of the southern region has been challenging all sorts of geniuses for the past half a month, but he hasn't suffered a single defeat until today. That's because none of the geniuses with direct entry qualifications are here. Otherwise, as long as any one of Small Saber King, Yao Huiyu or Dong Ling came, wouldn't that be enough to take care of him?" Someone interrupted from the side. "However, this Mu Rongqing is indeed very powerful. I'm definitely no match for him." The first person sighed. The expression of the person who interrupted changed. He obviously wasn't Mu Rongqing's match, but he didn't want to admit it in public. He only snorted and said, "He just cultivated a few more years than me, or else I could easily suppress him." Ling Han swept a glance over him. This person was in the flower blossom tier, and looked to be in his early 30s, and judging from his blood qi, he was about that age. However, Mu Rongqing was much younger, at most 30. If one were to say who had cultivated a few more years, it would be him and not Mu Rongqing. This was really too sour. "Haha, Mu Rongqing has met his match this time," the first person said with a laugh. Ling Han looked at the Rain Emperor and said, "Then who's Mu Rongqing's opponent?" "A very low-key guy. Before he made his move, no one would have thought he'd be so fierce. They didn't even know he was actually an elite of the spiritual infant tier." The first person exclaimed, "It seems like no one recognizes him." Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "I do. He's called the Fist Emperor." Many people beside the Fist Emperor heard this, and all revealed shocked expressions. How could the word emperor be used carelessly? Emperor represented the pinnacle of martial art. In this era, if one wasn't an elite of the Shattering Void tier, who dared to call themselves emperor? Even someone as powerful as Small Saber King was only a king with the word small in it. The Fist Emperor represented the pinnacle of the art of fists. No one who used fists was his match, which was why he could be crowned with such a title. Ling Han said unhurriedly, "Believe me, in the future, he'll definitely live up to his name." The greatest genius of the desolate north wasn't Qin Yi, but this Rain Emperor. In comparison, Qin Yi still lacked that domineering aura, so he prostrated himself at Ling Han's feet. However, if it was the Rain Emperor, no matter how much help or how much pressure he was given, he would only be grateful but not condescend. This was the domineering aura of an emperor, and also the temperament that an ultimate elite had to possess. Those people nearby naturally didn't believe it. Though the spiritual infant tier was very strong, there was no lack of deity transformation, heaven tier, and shattering void tier cultivators in the middle state. With the suppression of 3 great tiers of elites, how could it be easy to become an emperor? Mu Rongqing and the Rain Emperor were still locked in a fierce battle. Between the two, one was superior in terms of martial arts techniques, and his whole body was exuding a green divine light, while the other had long since condensed into a ray, and the power of his fists was terrifying. He also had a natural sensitivity towards martial art, and could improve himself in battle, becoming stronger the more he fought. They fought for a whole day and night, yet there was still no clear victor, and finally they shook hands and made up. Both of them were geniuses of fists, and could not help but appreciate each other. After they landed, they began to discuss. Ling Han walked over, and said with a smile, "Lord Rain Emperor, long time no see." Ling Han. The Rain Emperor walked over, and couldn't help but laugh loudly, full of heroic spirit. "At first, I thought that my cultivation speed was already fast enough, but compared to yours, it immediately pales in comparison." He had just broken through to the spiritual infant tier, and Ling Han was already in the late stage of the flower blossom tier. Though there was still a barrier of a great tier between them, he believed that for a monster like Ling Han, this barrier wouldn't be able to hold him back for long. Ling Han, however, truly admired the Rain Emperor. He could ignore the barrier of a great tier, and that was because he had the experience of others. However, the Rain Emperor was born in the desolate north, and relied on his own hard work and talent to consecutively break through to the flower blossom tier and spiritual infant tier in a short 2 years. This was the truly impressive thing. Even in his last life, even if the Sword Emperor and the others were dragged out, they wouldn't be able to compare. Of course, this was because the Rain Emperor had been stuck in the spiritual pedestal tier for too long, and had also absorbed power of the nation for many years, which allowed him to directly soar to the 9 heavens the moment he left the shallow waters. After this, the Rain Emperor definitely wouldn't be able to maintain such a high speed anymore. Come, Murong, let me introduce to you. This is Ling Han." The Rain Emperor grabbed Ling Han's hand, and turned to Mu Rongqing. "Flower blossom tier." Mu Rongqing looked surprised. He had never thought that the Rain Emperor would actually be so cordial towards a junior of the flower blossom tier. "So what if you're in the flower blossom tier? If you're not convinced, Uncle Rabbit will kick your face until it's bloody." Who would have thought that Rabbit would be the first to fly into a rage? Pong, its feet kicked Murongqing's butt, and with a pong Murongqing's whole body was stabbed into the soil. Chapter 625. The people nearby all had strange expressions on their faces. To be able to come here, one had to at least be in the spiritual pedestal tier, and usually they had gone to many historical sites and abodes to gain experience and had seen many strange things, but a rabbit actually opened its mouth and spoke the human language, which still made them dizzy from shock. Moreover, this rabbit was very fierce. It had sent Murongqing flying with a single kick. Its strength was obvious to all. Xiao. Murongqing jumped to his feet, looked left and right and said, "Who dares to sneak attack me?" Seeing that everyone's gazes were fixed on a large white rabbit, his face involuntarily twisted as he exclaimed, "This damned rabbit can even speak. Die your whole family." Rabbit's legs kicked out and rushed out, fighting Murongqing. Lord Rabbit's 18 eagle kicks. Pung 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 pung. The rabbit's speed was extremely fast. As it bounced around, its legs kicked wildly at Murongqing. "Stupid rabbit, I have no enmity with you. Kick your sister," raged Murongqing. "You still dare to scold your Lord Rabbit? If I don't kick you, who else should I kick?" Rabbit squawked and kicked non-stop. Don't say that the rabbit was bitten by Hunyo all day, and acted like a good person, but that was only towards Hunyo alone. When it came to others, it was a standard gangster rabbit, full of ruffian talk and rude and overbearing. A man and a rabbit clashed. Soon they rose into the air and engaged in a fierce battle. "Ignore them." Ling Han chuckled. He had finally figured it out. Although Murongqing's talent in martial art was shocking, he was also an idiot. It was better to let him and the gangster rabbit be brothers. When you've had enough, you'll naturally stop. Zhu Xian'er had learned this phrase from Ling Han. Ling Han told the Rain Emperor about what had happened in these 2 years, and the Rain Emperor suddenly said, "I think you shouldn't have to worry that someone will make a move against you because of the whereabouts of the divine treasury." "What do you mean?" Ling Han seemed very curious. When Yi Jian came to the Central Plains not long ago, and separately went to the Heaven Sword sect, Absolute Saber sect, and other ancient sections. Now these sects jointly announced that no one is allowed to kill Wen Yi Jian, or else they will become enemies with these sections. Come to think of it, when Yi Jian told the news of the divine treasure trove to those sects in exchange for protection, Rain Emperor explained, "Oh, there was actually such a thing." Ling Han thought about it and had to admit the helplessness and decisiveness of Wen Yi Jian's action. Ling Han didn't have the Black Tower, and not to mention encountering a Shattering Void tier elite. Even if a deity transformation tier elite came, he would have nowhere to run. To him, not only did the divine treasures not bring him any benefits, they would also restrict his development. Hiding silently in the mountains and forests his entire life, what future could he have? Could he advance into the Shattering Void tier, and then become a god? Since he couldn't become a god, wasn't the divine treasury just empty talk? On the contrary, not only did he not suffer any loss by handing over the coordinates of the divine treasures, he could even negotiate with the major sects and obtain some benefits. If his luck was heaven-defying, he would still be able to fight for that divine treasury after he entered the god realm. If he didn't have the Black Tower, perhaps he could only be like Wen Yi Jian. Now that the coordinates of the divine treasure trove had fallen into the hands of a few great ancient sects, there wasn't much meaning for others to seize it. You couldn't even enter the Shattering Void tier, so could you go to the divine realm to dig for treasures? Wen Yi Jian coming like this also helped Ling Han resolve a crisis. Ling Han just took a glance, and the little girl pulled him to leave, making Ling Han very puzzled. Wasn't shopping a woman's favorite daily activity? Zhu Xian'er were so engrossed. After walking for a while, they saw a group of people surrounding a small stall, appearing to be very lively. Ling Han also squeezed in. It turned out that everyone was interested in a bottle. This was truly an old item. The body was tattered, and the patterns on it were all blurred. The mouth of the bottle was even cracked, but even so, it still gave people a feeling of grandeur. The stall owner was an old man with spiritual infant tier cultivation, making people not dare to snatch it by force. "Old senior, what kind of treasured tool is this?" Ling Han asked. "Refined celestial bottle," the old man said indifferently. Ling Han was startled. The refined celestial refiner had such big words, actually wanting to refine an immortal spirit, but why? This ancient object couldn't possibly have such might, and the vein-like patterns on it were almost completely obliterated. How much? He asked again. If the price wasn't high, there was no harm in playing with it. Using treasured medicine to exchange for it can extend life, the old man said. Although he was very powerful, he was too old, and his qi and blood were dried up. Obviously, he didn't have many years left to live. For such an existence, there was nothing more precious than a treasured medicine that could prolong life. But who didn't want to live long? Treasured medicine that could prolong life was also the most precious spirit medicine, with a price but no supply. No wonder so many people didn't make a move. It wasn't that everyone didn't want to make a move, but the old man's asking price was too high, and not many people could afford it. Even if there was it really worth it to exchange for such a broken bottle? Chapter 626. Ling Han didn't care much. He had the Black Tower, so cultivating spirit medicine was extremely easy, and ginseng had the effect of consolidating one's vitality and prolonging one's lifespan. Especially 1,000-year-old ginseng, its effects were even more outstanding. To him, 1,000-year-old ginseng was like a carrot. Plucking as many as he wanted, he didn't feel the slightest heartache. Everyone, don't be fooled. A man suddenly stood out, pointing at the bottle, and said, "How could this be refined into a divine spirit? The vein-like patterns have already been obliterated, so how much power could be left? Moreover, how could there be a treasure to refine a divine spirit in the mortal realm? If it really was that powerful, wouldn't this person be able to wipe out the Heaven Sword sect and the Absolute Saber sect? Could it be that those places still lack treasured medicines?" Everyone couldn't help but nod. This bottle was indeed extraordinary, but if it was destroyed, how much power could it have? To exchange for the most precious life-prolonging treasured medicine, who would be willing? "Boss, make it cheaper. I have 100,000 origin crystals here, how about it, exchange? I have 3 green sun pills. I'll use a 5th-tier green hell gold to exchange." Everyone offered a price they could accept. This treasure tool was still quite attractive. Even if it was already damaged, and the will of martial art was about to be obliterated, there was still an immortal aura circulating, tempting them. Not exchanging. The old man insisted. He didn't have much lifespan left, and didn't have any descendants, so he only wanted to live a few more years. Other treasures were of no use, and could only be buried with him. That 300-year-old knotweed, someone offered. Knotweed was a top-notch tonic, and 300-year-old was even more impressive. It could at least extend one's lifespan by about 10 years. The old man revealed a hesitant expression. This treasured medicine was lower than his expectations, but after being belittled by the man before, this bottle didn't seem to be sold for too high a price, making him somewhat tempted. This should be a replica of the refined celestial bottle. How could the real thing fall into the mortal realm, and how could it be damaged? It was still the man who spoke belittling before. He kept observing the bottle. Although it's not the real thing, and it's very damaged, it still has some research value. He paused for a moment and said, "Then I'll offer 2 200-year-old dark cloud ginseng." The dark cloud ginseng was also a life-prolonging spirit herb. A 200-year-old dark cloud ginseng could also extend one's life by about 10 years. However, the effects of this kind of spirit herb could not be stacked. Consuming the first stalk would give one full effect, but consuming the second stalk would only give 1/2 of the effect. After that, the effects would become increasingly worse. Therefore, the effect of 2 dark cloud ginseng could only extend one's life for 15 years at most. But to a person who had 1 foot in the grave, living for another 5 years was an irresistible temptation. The old man raised his eyebrows. He had wanted to agree before, and now that he could live for another 5 years, he was even more tempted. Ling Han smiled and said, "I offer 1,000-year-old white jade ginseng." Hiss! Everyone cried out in surprise. 1,000-year-old ginseng? Are you joking? Even if ginseng is a spirit medicine that can live for a long time, 1,000 years should be the limit. Basically, very few ginseng can grow to such an age. Just like humans had a lifespan of 100 years, how many mortals could live for 100 years? Moreover, there were so many people in the world who wanted to eat ginseng, and the older it was, the rarer it was. 100-year-old could be regarded as a flower blossom tier cultivator, which was pitifully rare. Those over 500 years were like deity transformation tier cultivators, and those over 1,000 years were like shattering void tier cultivators, which could be counted on one hand. This brat opened his mouth and offered 1,000-year-old treasured medicine. He had to be joking. Even the old man was somewhat doubtful and said, "Young man, are you serious?" Ling Han raised his hand, threw out a ginseng and said, "You can test it." The old man took it and carefully observed the ginseng. In fact, he wasn't very knowledgeable, but 1,000-year-old ginseng's medicinal power was strong, and he could sense it by smelling it. The old man was immediately sure that even if it wasn't 1,000-year-old, it was at least 800 or 900 years old. This was enough to extend his life by more than 30 years. He was obviously overjoyed and said, "Okay, this bottle is yours." "Wait." The man who belittled before spoke, looking at Ling Han with a cold gaze, and paused before saying, "I offer 3 700-year-old yellow dragon ginseng." A 700-year-old yellow dragon ginseng obviously couldn't compare to 1,000-year-old white jade ginseng, but with the addition of 3, it naturally surpassed. Everyone was puzzled at first. "Didn't you say that this bottle was broken and worthless? Why did you take out 3 treasured medicines to exchange for it?" They immediately understood that this man deliberately belittled before, on one hand to reduce competition, and on the other, he wanted to get the treasured tool at the lowest price. Now that he encountered a strong competitor, he could only increase the price if he still wanted the bottle. For Ling Han, although 1,000-year-old ginseng wasn't valuable at all, he didn't want to waste it carelessly. After all, this bottle was indeed too damaged, and other than being able to refer to ancient techniques, it was practically useless. But why was this man so proactive, even unscrupulous? Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth and looked at the bottle. He saw that the bottle was indeed severely damaged, and even if it could still display its power, it would first collapse. However, there was a layer of dazzling light at the bottom of the bottle, so intense that it was like a small sun, almost burning his eyes blind. A treasure! Ling Han's heart shook violently. Those were vein-like patterns so dazzling that even he couldn't bear it. It was definitely not simple. He no longer hesitated. Even if this bottle wasn't useful at all, it was worth it just for those vein-like patterns. He threw out another 1,000-year-old ginseng and said, "Then I'll use 2. According to age, 3 700-year-old yellow dragon ginseng were still above 2,000-year-old white jade ginseng, but considering that the effects of this kind of longevity medicine decreased the more one ate it, the effects of 3 yellow dragon ginseng couldn't compare to 2,000-year-old white jade ginseng at all. Anyone could calculate this kind of score, and the old man was naturally immediately tempted, but he still looked at the man from before. Should you increase the price? In any case, he would sell the item to the person who offered the highest price, maximizing his profits. That man looked at Ling Han and said, "I'll add a heart protection pill." The heart protection pill was an extremely precious medicinal pill. It could allow martial artists under the deity transformation tier to preserve their lives and slowly heal their injuries no matter how severe their injuries were. It was also a top-notch existence among Earth-grade middle-level medicinal pills. The old man was instantly tempted. With this kind of spirit pill, he could go to an ancient site and take an adventure. He might be able to obtain a fated chance, advance into the deity transformation tier, and snatch another 200 years of lifespan from the hands of the heavens. This was much better than any life-prolonging spirit medicine. Ling Han laughed out loud. Competing with him, the alchemy emperor in terms of alchemical pills? He lacked the materials for heaven-grade alchemical pills, so he could only concoct one, but he had plenty of earth-grade alchemical pills. "I'll add 2 more heart protection pills," he said. Pooh! Around them, many people had already spurted out. Were these 2 guys sure they were talking about earth-grade medicinal pills? Why did it feel like they were cheap and common goods? Chapter 627. Ma Duobao didn't take it to heart in the slightest, and said, "Come at me together. There's no need for you to say that, we have the same intention." Zhuo Qifeng, Wu Gaoyuan, and the other 4 prodigies of the immortal realm, together with the 2 18-eyed corpse kings, This lineup was truly terrifying to the point of making one's hair stand on end. Battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier is extremely rare even in the immortal realm. I'd really like to see it for myself. Unfortunately, so what if it's 20 stars of battle prowess? The gap between the immortal tier is too big, and the difference between breaking through 10 stars of Shattering Void tier and 20 stars of Shattering Void tier isn't very big, so there's absolutely no need to attack this limit. After today there will be no more Purple Moon Kingdom. Zhuo Qifeng and the others all sneered, their words filled with disdain. Ling Han, however, shook his head. It was precisely because the gap between each tier of the immortal tier was too big that it was necessary to cultivate each tier below it to perfection. Otherwise, what right did those so-called 1-star geniuses and 2-star geniuses have to be stronger than others? Zhuo Qifeng and the others said so only because they had no way of reaching the height of 20 stars. Any random person from the 5 great sects of the immortal realm would be able to sweep through the entire vast lands if they weren't suppressed by the power of the realm. But the 5 great sects might not be some top-notch force in the immortal realm, so the younger generation that they nurtured might not be able to cultivate to perfection in every tier. However, being able to reach 18 stars in the Shattering Void tier was already extremely extraordinary. At least in the vast lands, Ma Duobao and Helian Tianyun, 2 freaks, had only appeared in who knew how many millennia ago. Ma Duobao casually raised his hand and attacked the 7 great elites. Hey! The 5 great geniuses all attacked in unison. Wu Gaoyuan even brandished the mountain and river axe, and as the axe's surface swept past, even space itself was torn apart. The 2 18-eyed corpse kings were unafraid of Ma Duobao's strength, and directly faced him head-on. Pong pong, the 2 great corpse kings were immediately sent flying back, but with their clash, the might of Ma Duobao's attack was greatly reduced, and Zhuo Qifeng and the others could easily receive it. This also showed how powerful Ma Duobao was. It was only a casual attack, and it actually required 7 great elites with 18 stars of Shattering Void tier's battle prowess to work together to be able to match it. Ping ping pang pang, they very quickly became a mess. Both sides definitely had their ultimate moves that they hadn't used, fighting all the way from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain, and then to the sky. One after another, stars fell, as if it was the end of the world. Fortunately, the stars in the sky were formed from the power of heaven and earth, and could be continuously replenished. Otherwise, with the way the elites fought, the sky full of stars wouldn't be able to withstand such torment no matter how many there were. Hee, have you guys washed your necks clean? The heavenly Astral King said with a sneer. Although they, the 8 kings, couldn't be considered second-tier elites now, with 18 stars of Shattering Void tier battle prowess appearing, 15 stars of battle prowess was still in the 3rd tier. Although there were only 8 of them, they had enough confidence to defeat the 5 sects over 100 Shattering Void tier elites. Boasting shamelessly, several white-haired antiques began to burn their chi and blood. Hong, a terrifying power erupted from their bodies, and in an instant, their battle prowess soared to 14 stars. The 5 sects sure enough had deep roots. Even in the immortal realm, those who comprehended Saber Heart could still be called geniuses, though they were no longer so rare. You're looking down on me too much. What if you add me? And me? Me? Dong Ling the small sword emperor, and the son of lightning all took a step forward, their gazes cold. Ling Han shook the Revere Life Sword, and said, all right, I'll send you guys to hell, and let you guys atone for the innocent bloodshed by your ancestors. You're all just ants. Isn't it only right for you to make some contributions to the immortal realm? The son of lightning said with a hideous grin. He had already drawn out the imitation mountain river axe, and there was a sliver of realm power condensed within it. Its might was similarly not to be underestimated. Ling Han's expression hardened. He raised his sword horizontally, pointed it at the son of lightning, and said, just because of these words you deserve to die. Then you'll have to be able to kill me first. The son of lightning laughed loudly, and brandished the mountain river axe in an attack. This treasured tool had already awakened, and was exuding a terrifying might. Unfortunately, the Revere Life Sword did not react at all. Could it be that the battle with extremely resplendent brilliance just now had consumed too much of its energy? This was not impossible. The mountain river axe could be said to be this realm's strongest spirit tool, and added with Wu Gaoyuan's strength, how terrifying would it be? Yet it was blocked by the Revere Life Sword. Although it was under Ma Duobao's control, it must have been greatly exhausted, so it was normal that it could not unleash its might now. Ha 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 ha. When Su Xiuran arrived, he could not help but laugh loudly. If this sword of yours could not awaken, how could it possibly be a match for them? He too awakened the absolute saber, and slashed at Ling Han. Once these two spirit tools awaken, they would have the battle prowess of the shattering void tier. Furthermore, they would at least be at the level of 10 stars, which was even stronger than the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. This far surpassed Ling Han's own battle prowess. Chapter 628. A Beautiful Romance. Small Tower did not respond. It was unknown whether it was too lazy to respond, or because it had lost its memory and did not know. Ling Han did not receive an answer, but he was not disappointed. He had only asked casually, and did not really expect to receive an answer from Small Tower. He carefully studied these vein-like patterns, and pondered over the profoundness within. I seem to understand a little, Ling Han said to himself. The bottom of the bottle was actually a spirit tool, and after he poured his divine sense into it, the profoundness of the spirit tool was displayed to him. That elder said this was a refined celestial bottle, which was naturally too exaggerated. However, the bottom of this bottle is flat on the outside and concave on the inside. It is actually a bowl. The interior has its own space, and it can absorb all things and refine them into the most basic spiritual essence. Isn't this equivalent to refining origin crystals? Ling Han was very astonished. He continuously moved this bowl, and now it was a stone bowl. It was very small, and the mouth of the bowl was only the size of a palm, but the interior could form a very large space. It was very amazing. He pulled out the 5 spirit medicines, and then took out the stone bowl. Spiritual power poured into it, and the veins on the body of the bowl immediately lit up. The entire stone bowl became resplendent, and released a powerful attractive force. Those 5 spirit medicines immediately flew up, and they disappeared into the bowl. As expected, there was another space inside. The spirit medicines were obviously bigger than the stone bowl itself, but they were swallowed cleanly by the stone bowl without any difficulty. In a short while, Ling Han smelled a fragrance coming from the stone bowl. He looked again, and saw that there were no spirit medicines left in the bowl. They had turned into a drop of light green liquid, emitting a fragrance that refreshed the heart and refreshed the mind. Those were 5 spirit medicines, and each of them was 5th tier, but only a drop of medicinal liquid was formed. This was too exaggerated. Ling Han retracted his origin power, and the stone bowl instantly lost its brilliance and became extremely plain. It looked like an old antique. He turned the stone bowl upside down, and poured it towards his mouth. That green drop slowly fell, and it landed in his mouth. Instantly an indescribable fragrance filled his mouth, making him feel as if he was about to ascend to heaven and become an immortal. But what was even more astonishing was that the incredibly pure energy flowed down his throat into his stomach, and then spread, circulating throughout his entire body. What pure medicinal energy! Ling Han sighed ruefully. Normally, no matter if it was spirit medicine or alchemical pills, most of them only had the effect of accumulating origin power, but starting from the flower blossom tier, what martial artists needed more was comprehension of Tao. For example, in the flower blossom tier, if one wanted their Tao flower to grow, they would have to inscribe the intent of martial art on it. This was nourishment. An alchemy grandmaster like Ling Han could extract the will of the heavens and earth from medicinal herbs. Eating it would allow one to connect with the great Tao, thus promoting the improvement of one's martial art. However, this stone bowl served the same purpose. There were great Tao patterns in the spiritual liquid. It was incomparably astonishing. That's equivalent to an alchemy grandmaster. Furthermore, after a 5th tier material is purified, it actually has a 6th tier effect. This has even surpassed the effect of medicinal pills. Not only can medicinal ingredients be refined, but even spirit stones and rare metals can be refined. Even living beings are fine. I understand now why our predecessors sealed it in another spirit artifact to conceal its existence. That thing is truly heaven-defying, even harming the harmony of the world. If it fell into the hands of an evil person, it could be used to refine the common people to nourish themselves. That would be too dangerous. Ling Han sighed. The predecessors probably couldn't bear to destroy such a precious treasure, so they threw the bright pearl into the dark, burying it in another spirit tool. Tools are not divided into good or bad, depending on the intentions of the user. Ling Han said seriously, I definitely won't use this to harm all living beings in the world. Otherwise, even if I could obtain an endless supply of spiritual liquid, my heart would be shrouded by a demonic barrier. So how far could I advance in martial art? He cultivated the path of the strongest, not the emotionless slaughtering path. Otherwise, for the latter two, using this stone bowl to slaughter all living beings would be more in line with the path they chose. Small tower, I seem to have obtained something incredible, Ling Han said with a smile. Small tower appeared, stared at the stone bowl for a while and said, I remember this should be the heaven transformation bowl. However, this definitely isn't the real thing. In my hazy memory, the heaven transformation bowl was shattered long ago, and this is an imitation. It's not bad, right? If you give it to me, I can extract 7 flashes of source power. Only 7? Ling Han thought and said, that large chaos source rock, how much source power did you extract? 9, Small tower said calmly. This stone bowl was actually not as strong as that chaos source rock? Wait, the chaos source rock was something that even Azura Demon Emperor went crazy for, and how big was its volume? The stone bowl was so small, yet it could extract 7 flashes of source power, so its material was not inferior at all. It was like a piece of godly metal that was only 3 kilograms, yet forged into a level 10 spirit tool, while the other piece of godly metal that was 5 kilograms was the original embryo. Then, according to Small Tower's calculations, the latter was definitely more valuable, but for martial artists it was 100 times more valuable than the former. From a different perspective, every item's value was different. Ling Han was pleasantly surprised. This stone bowl couldn't replace alchemical pills because it could only extract the purest energy, unlike alchemical pills that were varied and had various uses. However, because it had the effect of purification, it could allow level 5 medicinal ingredients to have level 6 effects, which was very useful. There were too many low-level spirit herbs in the Black Tower that originally had no use, but now with the Heaven Transformation Bowl's purification, level 3 became level 4, level 4 became level 5, and waste could be reused. Ling Han tried it. He pulled out large amounts of level 3 medicinal ingredients and absorbed them into the Heaven Transformation Bowl for purification, quickly turning them into over 30 drops of liquid. However, he didn't stop and continued to urge the Heaven Transformation Bowl. These drops of liquid once again fused and purified into 1 drop. He tasted it and couldn't help but smile. This was equivalent to a 2-star origin crystal, but it was easier to absorb because it was directly ingested. 2-star origin crystal could only be refined by spiritual pedestal tier elites, and was equivalent to level 5 treasured medicine. Level 3 medicinal ingredients became level 5. Although the quantity was pitifully small, it was a qualitative change. Ling Han was extremely satisfied. The Black Tower and Heaven Transformation Bowl were practically a perfect match. His figure flashed and he exited the Black Tower. Strange, why did this brat suddenly appear? Rabbit saw him and couldn't help but shout out loudly. Ling Han laughed and said, My Qinggong is getting more and more awesome. This was definitely not Qinggong. Rabbit was certain that with its senses that were a whole tier higher, if Ling Han leaped over from afar, it would definitely be able to detect him. It's about time we can go to the banquet, Ling Han said with a smile. The 3 of them set out, having already inquired about it before, so they knew where to go now. After passing through a forest, a side courtyard suddenly appeared in front of them. It occupied a large area and there was actually a lake inside. This was definitely recently built. The walls and tiles were all very new. The Wang family was really extravagant. Their young miss cultivated here, and they built a side courtyard here. Not only that, starting from the main entrance of the side courtyard, there was a road paved with bluestone. It extended all the way for several miles, and on both sides were large patches of trees. Move to the side. A carriage drove over, and the coachman shouted coldly, Chapter 629. Ling Han didn't mind giving way. But this coachman shouted and actually lashed out with a whip, appearing extremely arrogant and overbearing. And this was only a coachman. If the coachman was so arrogant and overbearing, then what kind of person was the master? Ling Han frowned and pointed out with the index finger of his right hand. His anger was not obvious, and his finger just happened to touch the whip. However, this whip that was like a spirit snake immediately seemed to have been hit where it hurt, and instantly withered. How dare you? The coachman's gaze was cold, and he raised the whip, about to lash out again. You want to do it a second time? Ling Han stretched out his hand and grabbed the whip that the coachman hadn't retracted in time, and pulled hard. Ah! The coachman was instantly sent flying, and the terrifying origin power passed through the whip, causing considerable damage to the carriage and horses. The carriage immediately stopped, and the coachman also fell into the bushes on the side, groaning. Ma Tong, why did the carriage stop? A young man's voice came from inside the carriage, carrying some dissatisfaction. Could it be that we've already arrived? Replying, young master, we're still a bit short, but there are a few madmen blocking the way. This lowly one wanted to chase them away, and was even injured by one of the madmen. The coachman stood up with difficulty, but made a false accusation. Humph! The carriage door opened and a slender man walked out. He was very young, only about 24 or 25, and divine light twined all over his body, appearing very mighty. His face was full of arrogance, and his gaze swept over Ling Han and the others, his arrogance becoming even stronger. A group of country bumpkins who don't even have a carriage. Could it be that you guys also want to attend Fairy Yun's banquet? He asked. So what if I am? Ling Han said indifferently. Letting you country bumpkins attend the banquet is practically an insult to me. That young man said coldly. On top of that, you guys injured my coachman. If I don't make a move to teach you guys a lesson, how could it be justified? As expected, like master like servant. If he wasn't used to being arrogant and overbearing, how could that coachman just now directly attack and injure him without a second word? Ling Han cracked a smile, and said to Zhu Xian'er, encountering such an arrogant person, shouldn't you give him a beating? You should. Zhu Xian'er nodded with a smile. She naturally believed in Ling Han's strength. Even if they encountered a shattering void tier elite, didn't they still have the Black Tower? Moreover, Feng Peyun was Ling Han's sworn big brother, and even with the protection of a shattering void tier elite, he didn't see Ling Han being arrogant and overbearing, so how could others be worthy? Haha, I'm really curious. Where did you country bumpkins crawl out from? You don't even have a carriage, but you're also so arrogant. That really pisses me off. That young man leapt off the carriage. He strode forward majestically, his aura shocking. Don't say that I'm bullying you. My name is Zhuoqiu Lucheng, he said proudly. Ling Han laughed and said, should I cooperate with you and show an expression of reverence? What, you actually haven't heard of this young master's name? Zhuoqiu Lucheng was startled, and his gaze instantly became sinister. Unforgivable, you actually haven't heard of this young master's name. He dashed out and attacked Ling Han. As he stretched out his right hand, silver light twined around it as if it became a metal arm. Moreover, it was continuously enlarging, and vein-like patterns intertwined, emitting a terrifying aura. In all honesty, this person's strength was truly strong, and could be considered at the top of the flower blossom tier. Unfortunately, his opponent was Ling Han. Ling Han very casually reached out and grabbed Zhuoqiu Lucheng's chest, forcibly lifting him up. Under the latter's expression of disbelief, he waved his hand and slapped repeatedly. Pa pa pa, the sounds of slaps rang out. Fuck, I can't beat you into submission, you son of a bitch. The ruffian rabbit shouted as it waved its little front paws, itching to charge up and fight. Rabbit, speak more civilly, don't lead children astray. Ling Han turned his head and said, beat him, beat this bastard to death. Hunyo also hooted. The rabbit shrugged, meaning that it wasn't Uncle Rabbit who led the little girl astray. This was a violent maniac, and Uncle Rabbit's but full of teeth marks could prove it. Ling Han casually threw Zhuoqiu Lucheng to the side, and said, this brat is right. If we take the carriage to attend the banquet, it feels like our status instantly rises by a few levels. Come, 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 everyone get on the carriage. You. Zhuoqiu Lucheng was half angered to death. These three people actually wanted to seize his carriage, so of course it was of a higher level. One had to know that this carriage was his family's antique, a treasure that had been passed down for several thousand years. Back then, it was Zhuoqiu family's ancestors' chariot when he followed a great elite to conquer the world. He was similarly terrified and puzzled. Ling Han was obviously in the flower blossom tier like him, but why couldn't he stand a single move in front of the ladder? Could such a guy be the greatest genius that directly entered the Restore Heaven Academy? But why hadn't he heard of it before? In his panic and rage, he even forgot how inconceivable it was that a rabbit could speak. Zhu Xian'er and Hunyou gladly sat on the carriage. The rabbit also wanted to get on, but was thrown in front of the carriage by Ling Han. When the earth-burst wolf that served as the leg saw it, it instantly howled and bit at the rabbit. Damn you! The rabbit hurriedly broke into a run. The earth-burst wolf chased, and the carriage instantly moved, speeding forward. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly, but he felt even more strange inside. Rabbit's strength was obviously superior to that of the earth explosion wolf that had just broken through to the flower blossom tier. As long as it emitted a bit of pressure, it would be able to suppress this beast wolf's soul and scatter. However, it still chose to run. This was to make Hunyou laugh. Could it be that the rabbit knew Hunyou's background? Otherwise, why would this ruffian rabbit treat Hunyou so well, not retaliating when hit or scolded, and only howling when bitten? Now, it didn't hesitate to pretend to be in a sorry state to make Hunyou laugh. The pitiful Zhuoqiu Lucheng was thrown by Ling Han, and not only were his clothes dirty, they were also torn. He had no choice but to take out new clothes from his spatial ring to change, crying out in anger as he changed. The carriage moved very quickly, and this place wasn't far from the side courtyard, so the carriage arrived in a short while. Ling Han tightened the reins, and that earth-burst wolf's expression twisted, its teeth popping out as it forcibly stopped in its tracks. It was still unconvinced and wanted to turn around to bite, but Hunyou jumped out, both feet stepping on its head. It was already in a bad mood. Now that its head was being stepped on, it immediately wanted to bite this little human to death. However, before it could open its mouth, it sensed an incomparably terrifying aura. It was immediately frightened to the point where it lay on the ground and wagged its tail in a fawning manner. How was this still a wolf? It was obviously a stupid dog. Young masters Zhuoqiu. There were 4 sturdy servants and an old butler welcoming guests at the door. When the carriage arrived, they also walked over, but when Ling Han and the others actually walked out of the carriage, they couldn't help but feel strange. Wasn't this obviously the Zhuoqiu family's carriage? Chapter 630. Zhuoqiu. Ling Han smiled and casually made up a story saying, "That guy suddenly got on his coachman and decided to elope, so he asked me to attend the banquet in his place." The old butler was astounded. He'd seen Zhuoqiu Lucheng a few times, and every time he came for his young lady, earnestly pursuing her. Why did he suddenly get on his coachman? Could it be that the young lady was too cold when she refused, causing Zhuoqiu Lucheng to suffer too much of a shock, twisting his outlook on life and bending him? "May I ask young master's name?" he asked. Anyway, his duty was to welcome guests, and whoever came in this carriage had the right to enter the courtyard. This was a rule he had to abide by. Han Lin. Ling Han once again used this fake name. He did not care whether he would be exposed or not. "So it's young Master Han, please." The old butler made an inviting gesture, and a sturdy man immediately came up to lead Ling Han and the others in. Slowly, Zhuoqiu Lucheng and his coachman ran over together. Because they were injured by Ling Han, they supported each other and went up. And very intimate. Could it be true the two of them really bent together? The old butler couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He'd heard that some men liked that, but never thought he'd see it with his own eyes, making his old face twist involuntarily. He even took a few steps back as if afraid of being infected. "Young Master Zhuoqiu?" he asked after retreating to a safe distance. "That person took my carriage. Stop him. Don't let this madman in. He's definitely here to cause trouble." Zhuoqiu Lucheng wasn't Ling Han's match, so he could only pin his hopes on the old butler. This was a spiritual infant tier elite, and who knew how many years ago he'd stepped into this tier. Although he didn't advance into the deity transformation tier, he tempered this tier to an extremely solid state, and his battle prowess was terrifying. The old butler gave an "oh" and looked towards Ling Han, revealing a sinister expression, and said, "Young Master Han, is there any falsehood in young Master Wuxia's words?" Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "It's completely untrue. How could such a young and promising, humble and courteous young man like me possibly be a madman? I want to sue him for slander, and I hope that senior can uphold justice." This Wuxia Lucheng was so angry that he almost vomited blood. "You're still being humble and polite?" He pointed to the injuries on his body and said, "Aren't these caused by you?" The coachman hurriedly nodded and leaned on Wuxia Lucheng's chest with an aggrieved expression. He was like a helpless little bird, extremely aggrieved. "Damn, I'm going to go blind." Not even the old butler dared to witness such a scene. He hurriedly turned his head and said to Ling Han, "Young Master Han, rules are rules. Since young Master Wuxia said he didn't ask you to attend the banquet on his behalf, then please show me your invitation. Otherwise, I will have no choice but to chase you away." How could a country bumpkin receive an invitation? He must be trying to sneak in. Wuxia Lucheng discredited Ling Han. Ta, another carriage came over and stopped. A man with an imposing appearance walked out, and beside him was a beautiful woman. The two of them didn't look like a couple, but more like brother and sister. "Hey, isn't this Wuxia? Haha, why is he so miserable?" That man was first taken aback and then asked curiously. What Wuxia Lucheng feared the most right now was to have his scars poked open. Hearing this, he only snorted coldly and said, "Don't mind your own business. Don't you know that I, Li Fengyu, like to meddle in other people's business the most?" That man laughed loudly and called out to the beauty beside him, saying, "Sister, let's get a stool and some melon seeds. We'll play while we munch." "Brother." That beauty glared at him. Her appearance was moving and incomparably bright and beautiful. He really didn't know what to do with this brother. He was never proper all day long. "Also, Wuxia, you're hugging this person so tightly. Could it be that there's some unspeakable relationship between the two of you?" Li Fengyu looked at the coachman leaning on Wuxia Lucheng's chest, and his face was instantly filled with shock. Wuxia Lucheng was taken aback at first, then realized that the coachman was actually leaning on his chest. It instantly made him feel disgusted, and he hurriedly pushed the other away with a look of disgust. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Truly heartless when plucking a bird, deeply disdainful. So Wuxia actually has this kind of hobby, and in order to hide it, he purposely neglected his lover in front of others." Li Fengyu was taken aback. The old butler's throat trembled, and he wanted to vomit. The young geniuses of this generation appeared like bamboo shoots after a spring rain, and each was stronger than the last. But it was too messy even playing with this kind of style. "You!" Wuxia Lucheng roared angrily. "I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" Ling Han deliberately sighed and said, his secret was exposed, and he flew into a rage out of humiliation. In reality, this isn't much. Everyone has the right to like others. As long as you like them, why do you need to care about the views of the world? Li Fengyu expressed his deep agreement. Wuxia Lucheng, on the other hand, was trembling with anger. He wasn't gay at all. He still wanted to pursue the Wang family's pearl, but if news spread that he was messing around with men, then would he still have any hope? "This brother. Let's go together and have a good chat." Li Fengyu's face was full of gossip. The content of this good chat was definitely Wuxia Lucheng and the coachman's unspeakable secret. Ling Han took out the invitation and handed it to the old butler. He walked towards Li Fengyu and said with a smile, "Sure. Don't say it." Wuxia Lucheng hurriedly shouted, "Don't say anything." Ling Han turned around and said, "Don't say anything between me and him." Wuxia Lucheng didn't even think and immediately shouted. Ling Han nodded and said, "Don't worry, I won't say it. I don't like to talk about other people's secrets behind their backs the most." Li Fengyu immediately made an "oh" sound. This time it was really confirmed. Wuxia Lucheng admitted it himself. The old butler wanted to vomit again. No. Wuxia Lucheng only reacted after staring blankly. This originally wasn't a big deal, but being argued like this was instead admitting his identity as a gay, and he immediately cried out. No need to say it, I understand. Li Fengyu nodded solemnly and said, Swordsmanship, don't worry, your secret is with me. I definitely won't tell a third person. Like hell I'll believe you. The smile on your face is almost uncontrollable. Also, who doesn't know your nickname, Big Mouth Li? Of course you won't tell a third person, but 300 people, 3,000 people. Zhuoqiu Lucheng hurriedly chased after him. No matter what, he had to stop Li Fengyu's nonsense. However, he had just caught up 2 steps when he felt his legs go soft, and his figure immediately fell towards the ground. Young master. The coachman hurriedly pounced over and hugged Zhuoqiu Lucheng. Li Fengyu, the hero saving the damsel in distress, saw this. Dirty, really too dirty. However, the expression on his face was as excited as it could be. Li Big Mouth's attribute was already burning fiercely. The old butler couldn't help it, and vomited with a wah. Young people nowadays were really incomprehensible. Chapter 631. The attack of dead souls had a certain damaging effect on the divine sense. After all, these female soldiers were extremely powerful when they were alive, and definitely far surpassed Ling Han. After death, they could still leave a mark in the world because their obsession did not dissipate. This was really very hard to imagine. It should be known that this large ship had crashed out from the void, and the void also had a strangling effect on the divine sense, but they appeared perfectly. These people were definitely immortals when they were alive. The impact Ling Han received was a little big. In the traditional understanding of martial artists, immortals represented something like indestructible and immortal, existing for eternity. But now, a divine ship had suffered great damage, and the immortals on it had all been killed. The so-called realm of immortals should only be the lower realm that had a higher level of martial arts. There were slightly more elites there, and they lived slightly longer. Their territory was slightly larger, and they had slightly more resources. However, they were not gods in the true sense of the word, being omnipotent and immortal. The 5 female soldiers all screamed and attacked, not only at Ling Han, but also at the others. Although they no longer had powerful strength, they still had a cutting effect on the divine sense. Ling Han could hold on for 8 to 10 years, but it did not mean that others could do the same. Elites of the Shattering Void tier were naturally fearless, especially those who had formed the heart of martial arts. Their divine sense was firm, but below the Shattering Void tier, as long as they had not formed the heart of martial arts, their faces would all turn pale, and they would feel extremely uncomfortable. Their divine sense was being torn apart by these dead souls, giving them a splitting headache. However, there could be a shocking treasure hidden inside this ship, and no one wanted to retreat at this time. Even if they could not obtain it themselves, they still wanted to take a look. This was an irresistible temptation for them. Moreover, fated chances were not something that could be obtained with strength alone. Otherwise, how could there be so many people searching for treasures in mystery realms? When there was someone stronger than them, they would have no choice but to retreat. Pa Deity Transformation Tier Cultivator suddenly fell head first, and did not get up again. Dead. The divine sense was destroyed, and the physical body was naturally an empty shell that would slowly decay. This was obviously a member of the 5 sects, and was a veteran Deity Transformation Tier Cultivator. In the outside world he could be considered an elite, but now he had died so silently. In fact, someone only stored his corpse into a spatial spirit tool, and did not even bother to bring him out for a proper burial. Pa. Under the onslaught of the dead souls of the female soldiers, there were still people who fell one after another. They were all in the Deity Transformation tier and the Flower Blossom tier. Martial artists with lower cultivation levels did not have the right to enter. Those below the Heaven tier, get out, the Sword Emperor said sternly. He had formed Sword Heart, and this shout went straight into their souls, instantly clearing the eyes of many people who had been blinded by greed. They woke up from their intense greed, and hurriedly retreated. If he didn't even have the qualifications to establish a foothold here, how could he talk about fortuitous encounters? Even so, the Heaven tier cultivators were still a bit strained, feeling so uncomfortable that they wanted to vomit. However, their divine sense would not be destroyed by the dead souls in a short period of time, and it was enough to support them to search through this large ship. They all searched one cabin after another. If a secret treasure appeared ahead, they did not have the right to compete with Ma Duobao and the other elites. This was the task of Zhuo Qifeng and the other elites. Ling Han and Ma Duobao walked side by side. There were only 5 dead souls of the female soldiers patrolling the bottom level, but judging from the number of cabins, the number of soldiers should far exceed this number. Only 5 dead souls of the female soldiers came out. Was it because the 5 of them were stronger, or were the dead souls of the others in other places? With this question in mind, they arrived at the second last level. This place was still divided into cabins, and judging from the size and layout, it was also used as a resting room for people, but like the lower level, there was only emptiness left here. As they walked, they encountered the dead souls of the 5-man team of female soldiers. This was also the existence that scared the others out of the ship, but this time no one was afraid, and continued to advance amidst the onslaught of the female soldiers. Although the ship was large, how long would it take for everyone to walk one round? They entered the third last level. This level was still the resting room, but it was obviously much more luxurious. Every room was bigger than the one below, and only those with higher status would have the right to stay here. If there were soldiers, then there would definitely be officials. There were more female soldiers patrolling here, at least 7 teams. Added with the 2 teams from before, there were about 50 dead souls continuously attacking. This was something that even heaven-tier elites could not bear. Those who had not formed the heart of martial arts were completely unable to resist, and they all held their heads and screamed in pain. Ling Han had long since stored Juxian air, rabbit, and gold-seeking rat into the Black Tower. Hu Niu was freakish, so she was naturally unafraid, and he himself had formed the heart of the sword, so he was also unafraid. The 5 sects were in a miserable state. In such a short period of time, they suffered heavy casualties, and the heaven-tier elite spirits were similarly destroyed, becoming warm living corpses. This, however, made the 9th Underworld King and the others' gazes burn with desire, almost drooling. This was the freshest material for refining corpses, and it still carried heat. If they were refined into corpse soldiers on the spot, they would definitely be able to unleash their maximum power. They even set their sights on shattering void-tier elites, who could be refined into corpse kings. Even though they were now allies, the people of the 5 sects felt their blood run cold from their gazes. They wanted nothing more than to kill these people first, and then consider the matter of searching for treasures. You don't mind if I take these corpses, right? It would be a waste to give them to you. The 9th Underworld King finally couldn't help but say. Oh. Ling Han deliberately looked Nong Manman up and down, and said with a smile, "Is Nong Manman lacking a son-in-law?" Nong Manman's expression instantly darkened. This youngster was really delusional, actually wanting to be Nong Manman's son-in-law. Audacious. Nong Shuiyun also squeezed out, pointing angrily at Ling Han and said, "Who are you, a toad wanting to eat swan meat?" The people nearby all laughed loudly. Nong Manman was Nong Manman's beloved daughter, and Nong Bo Xian, the ancestor of Nong Manman, was even a heaven-grade alchemist, on par with shattering void-tier elites. How outstanding of a man did one have to be to marry Nong Manman's daughter? Oh, Nong Manman's daughter is so noble that even Ling Han can't marry her? A voice filled with dominance was heard. Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing arrived together. They were both in the spiritual infant tier, and possessed a strong deterrent force. The surrounding people all involuntarily made way. Those who could come here were obviously geniuses among geniuses, but there weren't many in the spiritual infant tier, so how could they possibly stand against Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing's aura? The 2 great spiritual infant tier warriors stood by Ling Han's side, both crossing their arms in front of their chests, putting on a stance of support. Spiritual infant tier. In the present younger generation, there was temporarily no news of a deity transformation tier freak appearing, so spiritual infant tier was unashamedly the strongest. Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing's battle spread far and wide. Although they had just broken through to the spiritual infant tier, their battle prowess had at least reached 7 or 8 stars, able to battle elites of the older generation. Lady Man, if you marry my brother Ling, I'll give you this piece of Shuechen gold I just obtained as a congratulatory gift, Mu Rongqing said with a smile. With a flick of his hand, he threw out a completely white piece of metal. It wasn't much bigger than a fist, but it made many people stare with wide eyes, revealing a look of greed. Shuechen gold's grade was hard to determine because its use was extremely special. It needed to be refined with other rare metals to greatly increase the hardness of the finished tool, allowing an originally 7th-tier material to withstand the intent of an 8th-tier martial art. The upper limit was 7th tier, and it was impossible to turn an 8th-tier material into a 9th-tier one. Even so, everyone couldn't help but be envious. This piece of Shuechen gold was fist-sized, and if added to 7th-tier rare metals, it was enough to refine an 8th-tier weapon that most people would be satisfied with. Nong Man's breathing tightened, but her pretty face immediately showed annoyance. She was a dignified descendant of a heaven-grade alchemist, so how could she be bought by a piece of Shuechen gold? Wishful thinking, she reprimanded, feeling extremely insulted. Ling Han sighed, patted Mu Rongqing's shoulder, and said, Mu Rong, it's over for you. I still wanted to help you talk about this marriage, but they won't match your bit of betrothal gift at all. What? Mu Rongqing pointed at his own nose, revealing a look of surprise, then immediately shook his head and said, I don't want it. Ling Han laughed and said, then Lady Nong, sorry my brother isn't interested in you, so pretend I didn't say anything just now. Was it really okay to play people like this? Nong Man's almond-shaped eyes spewed fire, and Jing Shuang's expression wasn't much better. On the other side, Suoqiu Lucheng also invited help, and ran over aggressively, surrounding Ling Han and the others. You guys have gone too far. You think you can look down on everyone with 2 spiritual infant-tier elites. Everyone looked coldly at Ling Han and the others. The ones invited this time were a few top-notch geniuses who obtained direct entry into the Restore Heaven Academy. Once they arrived, suppressing Ling Han and the others wouldn't be as easy as turning over a hand. Wong wong wong, the sound of a zither suddenly rang out like a celestial sound, instantly calming everyone's anger. Chapter 633. A Beautiful Romance. Everyone looked over at the sound, and saw that in the pavilion in the center of the lake, a woman dressed in white had appeared at some point. Her black hair was like clouds, her hair like snow, beautiful to the point of being untainted by the aura of the mortal world. She was playing the zither, her white hands like jade. As she plucked lightly, a beautiful note spread out, intoxicating everyone's mind. This song shouldn't exist in the mortal world. The fish in the lake continuously jumped out of the water and gathered around the pavilion in the center of the lake, extremely cheerful. In the sky, a large number of birds flew over, dancing in the sky like fairies. The sound of the zither turned into talismans and entered the lake, stirring up slight waves, but without any destructive power, making the fish happy and the birds dance. Everyone revealed an intoxicated expression. This woman, this song should only exist in the heavens. How could it descend into the mortal world? Fairy Yun. What? She's Fairy Yun. Truly devastatingly beautiful. She's actually not the #1 beauty in the middle state. I don't believe it. I don't believe it either. Everyone shook their heads. Wang Yiyun's appearance was above Lu Yutong's level, but was inferior to Zhu Xian'er's, and added with this breathtakingly beautiful scene, it naturally added endless charm to her. Zhu Xian'er was a bit jealous, and moved close to Ling Han's ear, saying in a low voice, Xian'er also knows how to play the flute. Ling Han looked at her bright red lips, and his heart couldn't help but sway, and he said, all right, play it for me when you're free. Zhu Xian'er nodded, extremely gentle. Everyone, please be friendly. Wang Yiyun pressed her hands lightly on the zither, but the lingering sound still lingered. Her voice was also gentle and pleasant, ethereal like the dripping of spring water. Yes, everyone was convinced, nodding in agreement. Ling Han was surprised. This woman was only 23 or 24, but already crossed into the spiritual infant tier, very extraordinary. As expected of a disciple of an ancient great sect, Her tier far surpassed her peers, and no one in the North region could compare. In the other 3 regions, only a few well-known figures, like Mu Rongqing and the others, were qualified to compare. Our sect and the other great sects have divined the mysteries of the heavens, and believe that a great disaster will occur soon. Wang Yiyun continued to speak. The whole place was silent, and only her ethereal voice resounded. Nearly 10,000 years ago, the disaster that caused great destruction to the vast lands will descend once again, and our sect and the other great sects will act just like it did 10,000 years ago, joining hands to face the powerful enemy and plow through the world. However, just in case, we still decided to establish the Restore Heaven Academy to preserve the future hope and kindling as much as possible. Therefore, all of you are the key to reviving martial art in the future. You must not hurt your own people. After she finished speaking, she stood up and walked towards the shore. With every step she took, fishes jumped out of the water to play, and skylarks flew and danced behind her. It was as if a fairy had descended into the world, beautiful to the point where one's heart was pure and refined. Fairy, you are truly kind-hearted. The 5 great sects also have the world in their hearts. If there really is a disaster, only the 5 great sects can protect the world. Benevolence and righteousness. Great merit. Everyone was full of praise. Whether it was sincere or not, who would dare speak ill of the 5 great ancient sects? They were super forces with shattering void tier elites overseeing them, and any one of them could dominate the world. Everyone was talking at once. Beauties had a natural advantage, and the more beautiful they were, the more people would neglect the matter itself and be completely affected by their emotions. Leaning towards Wang Yiyun, Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Hu Niu, are you full?" "I'm barely not hungry." Hu Niu stuck out her little head from the pile of food. "The things here aren't tasty at all, making Niu so tired." Everyone was floored. "If it wasn't tasty, why did you eat so much? The plates piled up on the side were taller than you, okay? Moreover, you ate so much and still barely weren't hungry. What kind of stomach did you have?" "Alright, let's go back and continue eating," Ling Han said with a smile. Alright. Hu Niu clapped her hands and said coquettishly as she looked at Wang Yiyun, "You're really a failure as a host, making so many disgusting dishes for the guests to eat. AI Niu despises you." Fine, eating so much of her high-level beast meat and still despising her. This little girl was really ruthless. Wang Yiyun, however, wasn't angered in the slightest, and a smile still hung on her pretty face, as if nothing could sway her emotions. However, the people on the side couldn't help it. "Are there guests like you? Don't go, stay." "Yes, I want to spar with you." "That's right, fighting hurts the harmony, so let's spar." Chapter 634. No one dared to challenge Mu Rongqing and the Rain Emperor, because these two were spiritual infant tier elites, while Chu Hao was only in the flower blossom tier. Everyone was a prodigy of the present age, so who would be afraid in a battle of the same tier? And prodigies were even more conceited, confident that they were invincible in the same tier, so they wouldn't be afraid. If they could force Chu Hao to submit, then Wang Yiyun would definitely look up to them and remember them in her heart. Persimmons obviously had to be picked from the softest. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "You guys really want to spar with me?" "Of course." Those people called out one after another. "If you lose, hand over that bottle." "All right." Ling Han agreed readily. "However, you guys bet with me with empty promises, then what's in it for me if I win? If you want to spar with me, that's fine, but take out treasures no lower than 6 tiers. You think I'm afraid of you?" Instantly, someone took out treasures and placed them on the table. There were spirit medicines, rare metals, and some antiques, all of which were old. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Alright, line up if you want to challenge me. I'll accept all of them, as long as you can take out treasures. Place your bets together. I'll only accept reservations now. Come, those who want to challenge put their treasures on the table. Xianair, go tally it up." Zhu Xianair nodded gently. How did a proper battle challenge become like child's play? Everyone was young and spirited, and with a beauty in front of them, who was willing to admit defeat? Many people took out their own treasures and threw them on the table. Zhu Xian'er was in charge of screening, lest anyone take out low-tier treasures to fool her. I'll say this first, the bet is not refundable. You guys can only choose to fight with me or admit defeat without fighting. But there's no refunding of the bet. Ling Han said seriously. He wanted everyone to take out their bets first to prevent others from cowering after seeing his battle prowess. Humph, you think I'm afraid of you? The youngsters said with their heads held high. Ling Han looked at the treasures piled high on the table, revealed a smile and said, Is there anyone else? Is there anyone else? Only this time, no more after the deadline. If you want to curry favor with the Wang family's young lady, hurry up. There won't be another chance if you miss this one. He even used himself as an advertisement. Wang Yiyun's pretty face was still expressionless, but her slightly clenched 5 fingers showed that at this moment, a flame of anger had risen in her heart. No one else placed any more bets. With so many people taking turns to challenge him, Ling Han would definitely lose. And as long as he lost one round, he would lose the Aquarius bottle. What was the point of challenging him then? Ling Han couldn't help but feel regretful. Was this all he could swindle? He nodded and said, to save time, those who placed their bets just now, you can all come together. Puff, this guy was really arrogant. One had to know how many people had challenged Ling Han. There were at least 50 people who had challenged him, and these 50 people were not just any random person but rather prodigies of the current age. All of them had broken through to the flower blossom tier, and possessed the ability to challenge those at a higher cultivation level, ranging from 3 or 4 stars to 5 or 6 stars. With so many geniuses ganging up on him, which flower blossom tier cultivator would dare to be careless? Taking turns to fight was already exhausting, not to mention a group fight. All the prodigies wanted to save face. Naturally, none of them wanted to go up. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, Since no one dares to go up, then I've won. Xian'er, collect your bets. Let's retreat. You're not allowed to leave. Seeing that Ling Han was about to run, those youngsters were all displeased. Who dared not go up? They just didn't want to gang up on him. Even if they won, they would lose face. Moreover, who should the credit go to? But Ling Han was about to run, and they couldn't hold themselves back anymore. They all jumped out and surrounded Ling Han. I'll deal with you guys in 3 moves, Ling Han said, smiling. The arrogant youngsters were all furious, their eyes spitting fire. They only felt that Ling Han was really despicable, being able to incite their anger in an instant. Within 3 moves, it's more like we'll defeat you. Less nonsense, there's nothing to say to this kind of arrogant person. Just beat him down. All right. At least 20 people attacked at the same time. Hong, the intent of martial art spread. An origin power turned into all kinds of weapons, slashing, slicing, and chopping towards Ling Han. All kinds of chi overflowed and it was shockingly terrifying. Ling Han smiled slightly, and powerful origin power condensed. Lightning flashed on his body, and he casually punched out. Pung 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 pung. All the origin power weapons shattered at the same time, and all the chi was destroyed. But the lightning didn't stop spreading towards those people. It was so fast that it was like light. Instantly, figures were sent flying, and then fell down like flowers scattered by heavenly maidens, falling to the ground with pa 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 pa. More than 20 people were all defeated in 1 move. There are still 2 moves. Ling Han muttered, and he said to the remaining 20 people, all of you have to attack together. Otherwise, with only 2 moves left, I really won't be able to deal with all of you. All around there was silence. This youngster was so strong. Although none of these 20 or so people had obtained the qualification to enter directly into the Restore Heaven Academy, to be able to receive an invitation to attend the banquet, which one of them wasn't an extraordinary genius. However, over 20 of them were defeated in a single move when they attacked together, so how strong was Ling Han? Unless there was a suppression of a major tier, with such battle prowess, he was definitely the most genius to enter the Restore Heaven Academy directly. The remaining 20 people looked at each other, not daring to attack. Their battle prowess wasn't much stronger than the people lying on the ground, so what if they could withstand 1 move? What was the difference between losing in 2 moves and losing in 3 moves? Suffering a crushing defeat in front of everyone's eyes, weren't they idiots? Fight my ass. No wonder Ling Han had previously asked them to take out their wagers first. Indeed, after seeing his battle prowess, who would still be foolish enough to bet on such a freak? Only the greatest prodigies who had directly entered the Restore Heaven Academy would be able to match him. Zhu Xianair smiled faintly and put away all the treasures on the table. Other than robbing, swindling people also seems to be a shortcut to getting rich. Ling Han mumbled to himself, then smiled and said loudly, "Who else wants to challenge?" Everyone was speechless and turned their gazes towards the few geniuses that had the qualification to enter the academy directly. Wang Yiyun's beautiful eyes shone, and she said, "With Brother Ling's invincible might, you should have the qualification to enter the Restore Heaven Academy directly." Ling Han smiled and said, "Isn't that normal? Like this brother Mu Rongqing, didn't he also not get the qualification?" Mu Rongqing pointed at his own nose and said in displeasure, "Why are you using me to compare again?" "Just comparing without asking for your opinion, so please don't interrupt," Ling Han said with a smile and said to Wang Yiyun, "Miss Wang, can we go now?" "Brother Ling, this time, Yiyun invited everyone here to discuss something. Please sit for a moment," Wang Yiyun said, asking them to stay. "The food is so disgusting, I can't sit anymore," Hu Niu said, slapping the table, her face full of resentment. When everyone heard this, they all cried injustice for Wang Yiyun. The Wang family definitely put in a lot of effort to arrange this banquet, but from Hu Niu's mouth it became a slight to the guests. It was really a grievance. Oh. Chapter 635. That egg was obviously something incredible. Its preciousness was far greater than that of the reincarnation tea, but Hu Niu did not change in the slightest, which made Ling Han very puzzled. Amidst this confusion, Ling Han returned to the North region. At this time, the 4 regions had already been unified, and the flag of the Great Ling Empire had been planted there. Following the promulgation of one policy after another that was beneficial to the nation and the people, the hearts of the people were also rapidly unifying. Ling Han gave it a try. Under the condensation of power of the nation, his battle prowess actually reached a shocking 9 stars of Shattering Void tier. The battle prowess of the Shattering Void tier was too strong. Thus, it could be assumed that it was the addition of power of the nation that had reached 9 stars of Shattering Void tier. Ling Han's own battle prowess was practically negligible, and the reason he could be so strong was because his physique was too strong. If it were another Heaven tier elite, they would at most be able to reach 20 stars of Heaven tier battle prowess with the addition of power of the nation, and could not possibly improve further. Otherwise, their bodies would first collapse. But Ling Han was different. His physique was on the level of level 10 rare metal, and was enough to withstand 9 stars of Shattering Void tier battle prowess. And this had almost reached the limit of his physique. No wonder Ma Duobao had no intention of expanding his territory and increasing the number of people under his rule. He too had a physique on the level of level 10 rare metal, and could at most obtain the addition of 10 stars of battle prowess. Thus, there was no point in him expanding his territory any further. Going too far was as bad as not going far enough. Yet Ling Han did not have such worries. If he charged up to the Shattering Void tier, his physique could still improve further, and reach the level of godly metal. Then what was the limit of power of the nation that he could withstand? 20 stars, 30 stars, 50 stars. Perhaps all the willpower of the people in the entire vast lands could be added to his body alone, and there was no need to worry in the slightest that his body would explode. Only then did Ling Han realize the importance of having a strong physique. Combined with the power of the nation, it allowed him to become incomparably powerful. Of course, this was also because he had cultivated the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, which allowed him to possess such a physique. This kind of strength could not be replicated. His current spirit was incomparably powerful, and his mental state had advanced into the Shattering Void tier in advance, allowing him to perfectly control the battle prowess of 9 stars of Shattering Void tier. And in terms of comprehension of martial arts, he was also advancing at a tremendous pace, his speed astonishingly fast. At his level, martial arts was comprehending Tao, and the strength of his spirit and the improvement of his mental state allowed him to have no bottlenecks for breaking through at all. He only needed to continuously increase the accumulation of origin power, and his advancement would naturally be swift. At this rate, it was extremely possible that he would be able to charge into the Shattering Void Tier within a year. The Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing returned with a large group of people. Now that the 5 great sects had been dismantled, the Restore Heaven Academy naturally could no longer be maintained. These people were all elites among elites, geniuses among geniuses. At first, the 5 great sects had planned to bring them to the immortal realm to be hired thugs, which was enough to show that every one of them had extremely great potential and was worth nurturing. What Ling Han lacked the least right now was cultivation resources. The Purple Moon Empire was spreading the truth of the reckoning everywhere, and Ling Han cooperated, announcing the truth to the whole world in the 4 regions, letting everyone know that if they wanted to escape the fate of being refined into a realm pill, the only way was to split open the skies. In the beginning, the majority of people were naturally skeptical. After all, they had been brainwashed by the 5 great sects for over 10,000 years. But as time passed, more and more evidence was laid out, and naturally more people would choose to believe it. The more united the people's hearts were, the stronger the power of the nation would be. With the Rain Emperor's help, the pressure on Hellion Sun Shui was instantly greatly reduced. He had also been an emperor for many years, and was naturally shrewd and ruthless in handling affairs, not inferior to her. Ma Duobao had agreed with him that he would use a year's time to make preparations, and then split open the skies. Thus, Ling Han planned to cultivate properly in this 1 year. If Ma Duobao could split open the skies, that would naturally be great, and he would bask in the glory, but if he couldn't, then he would take the lead. This was the only way out for the vast lands. Ling Han prepared to change his cultivation technique after a while. It was not obtained from the sea race, but from the 5 great sections. After all, the cultivation techniques of the sea race were only suitable for the sea race, but after defeating the 5 great sects, Ma Duobao very generously allowed Ling Han to enter and choose a cultivation technique, and Ling Han chose an extreme yang technique. This similarly wasn't the most suitable for him, but it was still better than other cultivation techniques. Most importantly, Ling Han only needed to step into the Shattering Void Tier, and when he entered into the realm of immortals, there would naturally be immortal realm cultivation techniques for him to cultivate. Thus, if the cultivation speed of the Shattering Void Tier was a bit slower, then so be it. There were still some people from the 5 great sects who ran away, but now they had become birds startled by the mere twang of a bowstring, and street rats, so how would they dare to stick their heads out? 3 months passed, and everything was extremely peaceful. Meanwhile, Ling Han's cultivation was also skyrocketing, and he had already advanced into the 3rd layer of the Heaven Tier. His body arts had similarly improved significantly. However, Ling Han believed that if Xiao Miaoyan and the others appeared, then their target would be him. Even if they had eaten a leopard's gall, they wouldn't dare to seek out Ma Duobao. Ma Duobao was the world's #1 killing formation, and it was definitely a one-way trip, so they could only leave it to the real immortals to deal with. They had already communicated with the 5 great sects of the immortal realm through special channels, and reported the matter of the divine ship. They believed that the immortal realm would definitely send someone over. That woman's strength exceeded common sense, and she was definitely a supreme elite in the immortal realm, so how noble would the treasure that she was guarding even in death be? Thus, Ling Han believed that he and Hunyo would become the 5 great sects' main targets. In addition, the 1,000 Corpse sect would probably also become restless. The reason why they hadn't made a move yet was because they didn't know if Ma Duobao was deliberately using Ling Han as bait to lure them out. Another month passed, and what was supposed to come finally came. Xiao Miaoyan and Guanyang appeared, and with a sweep of their swords, the defensive barrier formed by the totem immediately collapsed. The 2 of them forced their way in, both of them seething with killing intent. Ling Han still not coming out? They shouted one after another. If you still don't come out, we'll slaughter everyone in the Imperial City, and then slaughter a city every day. Can you just watch as so many people die because of you? No. Ling Han stepped out into the air, and stood side by side with Xiao Miaoyan and Guanyang. However, there was a confident smile on his face. I'm here. However, the ending won't be as you think, but rather I'll take you down. Ha 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 ha. Xiao Miaoyan and Guanyang both laughed loudly. They had already ascertained Ma Duobao's location, and if the other party wanted to send reinforcements, it would take at least 3 days. 3 days' time was not enough for them to kill a heaven-tier elite a few hundred times. Therefore, they were not in a hurry to make a move, and of course would not deliberately waste time. Where does your confidence come from? Xiao Miaoyan said coldly, exuding fury. A dignified prodigy of the immortal realm had actually become a street rat after coming to the lower realm, and had to hide from place to place. How could she swallow this anger? Now she wanted to vent her anger on Ling Han. If it were not for him interfering, the Purple Moon Empire would have already lost the bet, and would not be able to make a move within 100 years. And with 100 years' time, the 5 sects of the immortal realm should have already set up the passageway for immortals to descend to the lower realm. So what if it was the world's #1 killing formation? Even if it could not be killed, it could still trap and banish him, making him watch helplessly as all the living beings in this world were refined into pills. Therefore she hated Ling Han even more than Ma Duobao. Ling Han did not answer, and merely looked into the distance, saying, Azura Demon Emperor, since you've come, why hide from place to place? You're just a puny heaven-tier elite. How did you discover this, Lord? Azura Demon Emperor appeared in the distance, his face filled with puzzlement and surprise. Chapter 636. Facing a real saber ray, and one that was formed from 30 flashes of qi, Ling Han didn't dare to take it head-on. Ray surpassed qi and it was an absolute suppression. Its edge was extremely sharp, capable of cutting through everything. Even if Ling Han cultivated body of iron sheet, he didn't dare to take it head-on. After all, this battle wasn't a spar, and could very possibly develop into a battle of life and death. He smiled faintly and said, You've improved, but don't tell me I haven't. A flash of lightning flashed on his body, and he instantly disappeared from where he stood, so fast that even the naked eye couldn't catch him. Xinyuan Ziguang revealed a shocked expression. What kind of movement art was this? How could it be so fast? Before he attacked, he already calculated Ling Han's battle prowess, and believed that after he condensed qi into ray, he could force Ling Han to retreat step by step, not even having the strength to parry. However, he never thought that after a few months, Ling Han's movement art would actually have a qualitative improvement. As expected, he wasn't the only one who improved. It's more than enough to kill you. Xinyuan Ziguang sneered, drawing his saber and slashing. This time, saber ray was resplendent, as long as 300 meters, and turned into a waterfall that swept towards Ling Han. Is that so? Ling Han turned into a flash of lightning, and with the demon fairy step, he was as slippery as a fish, agile and free. He used his left arm as a bow, and his right hand pulled. Wang, instantly an arrow of origin power condensed. It was lustrous white, yet emitted a shocking chill. Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow. Go! He shouted lightly, and the origin power arrow shot out. It arrived at Xinyuan Ziguang's chest in a flash. Don't say it was just one arrow, but it fused 3 mystical powers. The Eye of Truth broke through the weakest part of Xinyuan Ziguang's defense, and then activated the annihilating Dragon Star Arrow. He then accelerated with the power of lightning, making this arrow extremely fast, and at the same time, pierced towards the most difficult part of Xinyuan Ziguang's defense. Xinyuan Ziguang turned pale with fright, and immediately activated the power of bloodline. Endless flames gushed out from his body, and he instantly crossed the level of the flower blossom tier, reaching the spiritual infant tier. True dragon, true phoenix, and other ancient divine beasts roared around him, as if the son of a god had descended, possessing the supreme presence of a king. Puff the arrow arrived, but it didn't pierce through Xinyuan Ziguang's chest. Not even blood spurted out. It merely tore apart the clothes on his chest, revealing a set of navy blue armor. It was currently emitting a brilliant radiance as it forcibly refined the arrow of origin power. Ha 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 ha, I bear the mandate of heaven, and can pick up treasures on the road. Since I've received the mandate of heaven, how could I lose to you? Xinyuan Ziguang laughed wildly. With a wave of his right hand, 36 treasured sabers of various shapes flew out and surrounded Ling Han. Tiangang Annihilation Blade Formation. He shouted. Here we go again. Every time you use a move, you have to announce the next move. How annoying, said Ling Han. But he didn't dare to show any carelessness on his face. This blade formation was extremely terrifying and had the ability to threaten him. Tell me the whereabouts of Hellion Sun Shui, or else I'll definitely kill you. Xianyuan Ziguang controlled the saber formation and did not immediately unleash its might, merely staring coldly at Ling Han. What's wrong with you? Ling Han disdainfully refused. He drew out his long sword and activated the desolate Hell Sword, resisting the terrifying saber intent. You're asking for trouble, Xianyuan Ziguang said coldly, activating the saber formation and charging towards Ling Han. Ling Han brandished his sword to meet the attack, but Xianyuan Ziguang was really strong. Under the slash of saber ray, the saber formation was full of sharp rays, and each ray was enough to pose a fatal threat to flower blossom tier cultivators. No, even spiritual infant tier cultivators would tremble. That was saber ray, and its destructive power was too shocking. There was a huge gap between chi and ray, just like flower blossom tier and spiritual infant tier. This was a qualitative difference. It was very difficult for Ling Han to defend. Fortunately, he was not only agile, but his defense was also very shocking. Firstly, he had origin power to form a defense, and next he had a 6th-tier rare metal level physique. Even if these two were broken, he still had the indestructible heaven scroll circulating inside his body, which could instantly heal most of his injuries. Taking a step back, he still had 6 drops of indestructible true fluid, which was enough to bring him back to life several times. Saber ray slashed, and Ling Han was in a very sorry state. These 36 sabers should be a set that belonged to some great elite in the ancient times, but somehow fell into Xianyuan Ziguang's hands. Just as this guy said, being able to cultivate treasures even when he went out meant that he was born with a good fate. Fuck, do you think you're the only one with treasures? Ling Han snorted and said, scrap metal, wait for me to collect them all. Keep bragging. Xianyuan Ziguang sneered. Hurry up and tell me Hellion Sun Shui's whereabouts. He could be considered a sentimental person. Hellion Sun Shui obviously didn't pay much attention to him, but his feelings were very deep. Ling Han flipped his right hand and unleashed the Heaven Transformation Bowl. Collect. He activated the treasure, and instantly vein-like patterns intertwined. Wang, the stone bowl, immediately rose into the air, emitting endless light. Xiao, immediately 3 treasured sabers were collected inside. What? Everyone was speechless. The might of the saber formation was obvious to all, but this stone bowl that Ling Han unleashed could actually destroy the saber formation and collect the treasured sabers. It was truly unacceptable. Xianyuan Ziguang was even more dumbfounded. He was the clearest about the might of the 36 treasured sabers, and after being collected by the stone bowl, he also completely lost contact with the 3 treasured sabers, as if they had disappeared from this world. Xiao, the stone bowl didn't have any emotions, and continued to absorb the treasured sabers. In just a few breaths' time, another 7 sabers were collected inside. This is... Nong Man's beautiful eyes lit up. She recognized that this was the bottom of that refined celestial bottle, which was also the thing in her hand. She didn't think that it was actually a stone bowl, and so powerful. She wanted it even more. Wang Yun's phoenix eyes also narrowed slightly, thinking that if senior brother Lang could obtain this treasure, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. So what if it was small Saber King Yao Huiyu and Dong Linger? They would only be swept aside by senior brother Lang. However, how was she going to obtain this treasure? Ling Han was unmoved by force or persuasion, and wasn't easy to deal with. Xianyuan Ziguang hardened his heart, and shouted, explode! Wang, the remaining 26 treasured sabers simultaneously emitted a dazzling light, and the vein-like patterns on the bodies of the sabers spread out like a spider web, instantly obliterating them. Spiritual weapon self-destruct. Ling Han was aghast. What kind of spirit tool could self-destruct? It had to have nurtured a spirit tool. However, since it had nurtured an artifact spirit, it would be like a normal living being, placing survival as its top priority. Unless it had no other choice, it would definitely not self-destruct. For example, the Black Tower. If Ling Han wanted the small tower to self-destruct, would the small tower care about him? But under Xinyuan Ziguang's command, these spirit tools all chose to self-detonate at the same time, as if he was the king of spirit tools. Once his command was given, it could not be refused. Fuck, these spirit tools were all level 7 items, and in Xinyuan Ziguang's hands, they couldn't display the standard they should have. But once they self-detonated, 26 high-level spiritual infant tier elites would explode with full power together, blasting out a great move that would perish together. Just how terrifying would the power be? Without another word, Ling Han rode on the lightning to break out of the encirclement. Chapter 637. Peng 26 treasured sabers exploded at the same time, instantly forming a blinding light in the sky. The terrifying energy blasted down, and pung pung pung, the Wang family's side courtyard was instantly shaken into ruins. So what if they were in the flower blossom tier? Under the impact of the aftermath, they all vomited blood repeatedly, and spiritual pedestal tier warriors were even more miserable. In light cases they were covered in blood, and in heavy cases their bones and tendons were broken. It was equivalent to 26 high-level spiritual infant tier warriors risking their lives, so of course this attack was terrifying. Zhu Xian'er was fine. There were 3 spiritual infant tier warriors by her side, enough to dissipate the aftermath, and Hu Niu was even more special. With a wave of her small hand, the shock wave was cut apart by her and passed on both sides, unable to harm her at all. Extremely far away, Ling Han appeared, his face pale and couldn't help but vomit a mouthful of blood, but his face revealed a joyful expression. The heaven transformation bowl sucked in 10 treasured sabers, and by now they were all refined, turning into a pool of liquid metal. He poured it out, and the liquid quickly solidified, turning into a piece of metal. Weighing it, it was at least 50 kilograms. However, compared to the weight of 10 treasured sabers, it was at least 100 times lighter. This was the effect of the Heaven Transformation Bowl purification. It was a 7th tier treasured saber before, and now, after purification, it should reach the 8th tier. However, this piece of metal turned into an alloy, and Ling Han couldn't clearly say what this metal should be called. Whatever, it was 8th tier rare metal anyway, and he could forge many more sharp arrows. He circulated the indestructible Heaven's scroll, and the injuries on his body were immediately healed. He smiled slightly and said, "Boy of wealth, do you have any more treasures to give to your grandfather?" Xinyuan Ziguang jumped like thunder. He didn't want to give treasures to Ling Han, but he didn't think that the latter could actually summon a strange stone bowl that easily broke his saber array. He'd rather destroy it than give it to Ling Han, so he activated the saber array to self-destruct. Even so, he couldn't heavily injure Ling Han, making him feel a strong sense of dejection. Ling Han decided not to kill Xinyuan Ziguang. This person's luck was nature-defying, and there were treasures smashed as soon as he went out. Ling Han would let him smash a few more times, and he would be able to loot again in the future. This was like planting chives. If you dug them up, you could only harvest them once. But if you left the roots, you could harvest them in batches. If Xinyuan Ziguang knew what Ling Han was thinking, how would he feel? Wang Yiyun looked at the ruins on the ground, a faint smile still on her pretty face, but there was an additional killing intent in her eyes. A perfectly fine banquet was ruined by Ling Han and Xinyuan Ziguang just like that, but Xinyuan Ziguang was one of them, so if she wanted to hate someone, she could only hate Ling Han. Brother Ling, I've said it before. If you don't accept my senior brother as the alliance master, Yiyun will fight on my senior brother's behalf. She waved her sleeves. Her temperament was elegant like a fairy. Ling Han looked at him and revealed a smile. Do you also want to bet something with me? That stone bowl. Wang Yiyun pointed with her slender finger. If I win, you give that stone bowl to me. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, all right, then if you lose, you have to agree to my brother's marriage proposal. He pointed at Murong Qing. Pa, I don't want to marry this ugly girl. Murong Qing was so angry that she jumped up. Don't always use me as an excuse. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, AI, there's no helping it. My brother won't marry you, so let's use some rare metals and spirit medicines to bet. Insolence. Many youngsters roared angrily. He actually dared to blaspheme the fairy in their hearts. Wang Yiyun, however, was incredibly calm. She casually threw out a spirit medicine and said, "This is Danyang Phoenix Crygrass. It's considered high grade among level 7 spirit medicines. Is it enough?" "Barely." Ling Han nodded. Let alone a level 7 spirit medicine, even a level 10 divine medicine couldn't compare to the Heaven Transformation Bowl, but he had the confidence to win, so if he earned a little less, then so be it. Wang Yiyun continued, "However, since that stone bowl is the wager, please put it aside. Brother Ling Yiyun is worried that Brother Ling won't acknowledge the bet if you lose." This woman was so astute. To Ling Han, the stone bowl was a powerful spirit tool. Previously, even Xinyuan Ziguang's terrifying saber array was broken, but with a few words from Wang Yiyun, he actually couldn't use it anymore. As expected, she had a glib tongue and a meticulous mind. Ling Han laughed loudly and casually threw the stone bowl aside. He said, "You're very smart, but be careful. Don't let your cleverness get the better of you." Wang Yiyun smiled calmly, and with a wave of her hands, a guqin appeared in front of her. It looked extremely ancient, and carved on the body of the guqin were many fully armored warriors, bathing in blood and fighting bravely. It was a little out of place. She sat in the air, her figure slowly floating up, and said, "Brother Ling, please listen to a song of mine." Wang. Her hands moved, and the sound of the guqin immediately spread out. It was gentle and beautiful, like the sounds of nature. Everyone revealed dazzled expressions. Wang Yiyun possessed outstanding looks, and added with her skill in the guqin, she indeed had the charm to bewitch millions. The sound of the guqin spread, and Ling Han's gaze was slightly dazed. Trying to sway his mind, Ling Han immediately revealed a cold smile. She was really too naive. He had a sliver of heaven-tier divine sense, and a mere spiritual infant-tier warrior wanted to bewitch him? Chung! The sound of the guqin suddenly changed, turning from the gentle beauty to stern, as if there were ambushes on all sides, and killing was about to happen. Wang, 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 the fully armored warriors on the guqin all lit up, and as the sound of the guqin drifted, they all walked out and stood in the air. There was a total of 81 warriors, and every one of them was a high-level spiritual infant-tier being. This guqin was actually a spirit tool as well, and could summon 81 spiritual infant-tier elites, truly shocking. It was no wonder that Wang Yiyun schemed to have Ling Han put the Heaven Transformation Bowl to one side. She was afraid that the Heaven Transformation Bowl would restrict the guqin. Now, 81 high-level spiritual infant-tier warriors appeared, so how could he block them? It had to be known that they were only summoned by a spirit tool, and wouldn't fear death or injury. It could be said that they were the same as corpse soldiers, the most loyal death warriors. These warriors were fully armed, wearing incredibly thick armor, and wielding all kinds of weapons in their hands. One after another, vein-like patterns shone, and they charged towards Ling Han without hesitation. Everyone felt a sense of suffocation. Previously, there were only 36 treasured sabers, but now there were 81 spiritual infant-tier warriors, which was even more unrivaled. Ling Han, on the other hand, was unafraid. Xinyuan Ziguang had unleashed 36 level 7 spirit tools in one go, and these 81 spiritual infant-tier warriors in front of him were only unleashed by a single spirit tool. Their might couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. He directly unleashed the demon sky sword. Wasn't it just a competition of spirit tools? Who was afraid of who? Wang, the vein-like patterns on the demon sky sword lit up. 1, 2, 3. There was one more. Not just one more, this was a level 10 spirit tool, so how could it be so weak? Instantly an endless might circulated. Ling Han stood with the sword in hand, like a great demon king, exuding an incredibly terrifying aura, completely suppressing the 81 spiritual infant-tier warriors. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.